What is up, beautiful people? How we doing today?
What it is, what it is.
You know what I love about that intro is that
What?
Gianmarco's so scared of missing the countdown that he like does the intro like 5 seconds early to make sure he doesn't fuck it up. He's like, I don't care about this countdown at all. 5 seconds, hit it.
In fairness, he's got a decent track record of destroying that intro. Like, it terrifies me to try it because he does it bad so many times.
I could do it. I literally do it every time for Scorch the Fears. It's never usually an issue.
It's very funny. You're the problem, bro. Just so we're clear, that's what.
But sorry, Gianmarco. I had to start with that because I think it was really funny.
So, guys, today's going to be an interesting day. Please don't think by the name of the title of this podcast that we've given up on finding Jonah a life partner, because we certainly have not. It's definitely very much on the active to-do list. However, in a meeting, a conversation came up about an interesting topic. I sent over a documentary. Jonah got sucked in and enthralled. And then 2 hours into the documentary, he was like, Keanu, we're talking about this no matter whether you like it or not. That's not actually how it went. He was like, if you made me watch 2 hours of that bullshit, we're definitely talking about this on the podcast. It was more like,
if I'm watching 2 hours of this horse, we got to get something productive out of me watching this for 2 hours. Because what am I doing?
Yeah. So that second version is more accurately what happened. But we're thinking about doing this series. We're going to test this out tonight. But as you guys see by the title, the name of the series is Questioning History. As you guys know, history, as the saying goes, is written by the victors. But the question is, do the victors give us the accurate story? I think this is what we're going to talk about. We've hinted around this topic a couple times on the podcast, whether we believe that, you know, the indoctrinated education system that we have from Rockefeller and Ford and all these things, you know, is that true history? What else about what we were told isn't true? We actually have a bunch of CIA documents that are in the process of being released to the public that are about very significant figures in American history that will tell us how much of American history was a lie. So what else exists? World's been around for thousands of years. Civilization has been around for all this time. How do we know what actually happened? Today, we're starting with some of our world's most famous buildings. Did they come about the way they came about? Are Italians really as talented as they claim to be? I guess we'll find out.
Start with the Italians. Yeah, I mean, so are we starting with the documentary? Are we actually watching the documentary?
What do you think? Let's watch the documentary, right? Like, we'll
watch a little bit of this documentary. Keanu loves this documentary, right? He thinks this is the sickest documentary ever created. I want that to be the preface of this. Like, how much he's like, this is the craziest shit I've ever seen. I'm in. This is the truth.
So now what I think we'll do is we'll watch like the first little bit of the documentary and we'll just pause it, right? Because I think what he does put out, the premise of the documentary, I don't actually agree with a lot of this guy's premises. So when I listen to him talk, I'm like, all right, bro, cool. But the way I approach topics like this is I don't approach these topics with this preconceived idea that my worldview is accurate. That's just not how I look at things. I look at things with the perspective of, I could be wrong. What the hell do I know? Because here's one thing that 100% of us have in common. None of us were here 200 years ago. If you were, please come up, because we have a lot of fucking questions to ask you. If you were around here. Gianmarco, were you here 200 years ago?
I was.
So Gianmarco's actually a vampire. And we're going to talk to him about that in a little bit. But here's the reality, right? We talked about this because we almost didn't want to have this conversation. Me and Jonah don't want to do debatey type topics. We'll get into them maybe, and we'll do that. But really, like, for me, when I have these conversations, I just want to have them with an open mind. And that's kind of our goal today, guys, is really just to approach these things with an open mind. Because the way I see it is none of us were here 200 years ago. So the reality is the shit that they gave us in our history books, I'm believing that by faith as much as I'm believing anything else. And I am naive to think otherwise. So rather than immediately discredit this thing, just because it seems outlandish to me, I personally, Daniel, take the stance. What do I know? I wasn't there. Let me at least hear it with an open mind, and let's see what happens. And so I think that's what we're going to do today. I don't agree with a lot of the way this guy presents his stuff necessarily. I don't know if he's right or wrong. He does present some interesting information. Some of the information he presents actually begs the question. So I say we watch it. We'll pause it. We'll do some Googles. We'll do some GPTs. We'll vet some of what homie's saying. Jonah may have a harder time with the open-mindedness than
I'm just gonna say this one thing. This guy sounds so fucking high. I feel like when I'm listening to it, he sounds like he's blazing the entire time as well. And he puts this the music makes it engaging, kind of. Like he puts some good music of being like where you're like, I feel like instead of me wanting to pull my hair out while watching it, if I had just smoked a fuck ton of weed and then watched it, I think I would have liked it a lot more. I think I just would have enjoyed the process more.
Did you smoke weed before today?
But what do you mean by that? Ever or before this podcast?
Before this podcast.
Today? No, I don't smoke weed that much anymore. I used to smoke a lot.
You look like a dude that used to smoke a lot of weed. You just got that vibe.
I used to. A long time ago.
Well, you still have time if it's going to help you get through this thing. So here's what we're going to do, guys. We're going to watch
Jay in the middle of the podcast.
Blaze. Just get blazed. So we're gonna watch this. We're gonna pause it. We're gonna vet homie and see if he really knows what he's talking about. And then I want to hear from y'all. Like, what do you think? Do you think this is a thing? Is this a vibe? Is it not a vibe? Is this guy a complete psychopath? Is there something to this? I feel like there's going to be a little bit of a combination of both. Jonah probably thinks no. My third grade teacher was the smartest person ever, and they told me everything.
Keanu, can I respectfully say you didn't know Miss Adamson? She would have fucking schooled you. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah, what do you know? What do you know? Like,
who the fuck are you? I feel like my third grade teacher might. Who knows, dude? Maybe my third grade teacher's a beast. You don't know what he's doing.
You know, like you don't know, man.
Maybe your third grade teacher is also.
Sounds like you're making a lot of freaking assumptions over here, Keanu. Maybe you should pipe down about third grade teachers, okay?
So for those of you who are wondering what the hell Gianmarco's doing here, here's why. One, we love him. Two, we needed another shade in the podcast. Three, we really just want to say we want to trigger him because we may insult Italy today.
No, I'm here to defend Europe, not even Italy, Europe, because you're gonna go on
Europe needs your ass, bro. Like Europe's out here like I'm glad we got Gianmarco.
Yeah, trust me. After this conversation, for sure, man. Because I don't know where you're gonna go with this, but I have to come here and explain things, I think.
So we're gonna do our best to be open-minded. By we, I mean me and maybe Jonah. I'm pretty sure Gianmarco's just going to get in his feelings today, guys. So if we're going to have an open-minded dialogue, folks, I'm going to need y'all in the chat to participate and give us your thoughts on this stuff and let us know if you think there's any credence. What do you think, Jonah? Like, as I'm pulling this up, I'm going to pull this up and I'm going to queue up the time. Give me your thoughts. Like, from an objective standpoint, is there anything interesting here, or was there anything that
piqued entertaining as hell for me? The only things I feel like it gets right are things that are like kind of already known, right? The idea that like the Rockefellers and stuff like that shaped the education system. I feel maybe these aren't known things to most people. I feel like that was like kind of a known thing. Is like rich people in the 1800s helped shape the education system, right? I don't feel like that's insanely implausible or insanely controversial. Dude, I mean, we can just watch it. Look, I took college level science courses. He just throws out words I'm 95% sure aren't real. He's just there just with his hand, like he's just there just being like, and then the ionosphere goes into vortex mode. In 15, like literally, it's kind of that type of vibe. And I'm just like, bro, I don't think that's a word. Maybe I'm an idiot and maybe I don't know, but I took atmospheric science. There's no ionosphere. around
the
the
amount of times freaking Jonah has needed to demonstrate to us that he took atmospheric.
I'm just saying that, like, I'm just
Jonah,
saying
we get it,
that
bro.
I
We get it,
feel
bro. It's okay. It's cool. Congratulations, Jonah. Congratulations.
Like me freshman year smoking weed with like girls and being like, look, you've never heard of the fucking ionosphere like this before. Let me tell you something. The electrons through your body go crazy if you do like it gives me that vibe. That's all. That's like my actual interpretations. So yeah. Like, I think Jess got it. You just didn't get to that level, bro. Like, it's true. Maybe I'm just not there. Maybe I needed to take non-intro science courses. That's the issue.
Here is the most important takeaway, guys, for everybody that's watching this podcast tonight. I'm going to give it to you now. So if you have to leave, at least you left with something valuable. And here it is, guys. Jonah took atmospheric science when he was in college. That's it.
Crazy.
Mic drop. Crazy. All right, let's present this stuff. Here we go. Video share screen. Window. I have to share the entire screen to share audio. All right, guys. We're gonna watch it. We're gonna pause. We're gonna vet. Give us your opinion. Keep the chat going. Let's see what this dude has to say. Let me know if you can hear it.
Our journey begins in the unlikeliest of places, 19th century St. Petersburg, at the entrance to St. Isaac's Cathedral. The city cold, the early morning mists dissipating with the approach of the sun, and our boots caked in mud. The year is 1860, and while St. Petersburg stands regal and proud, its inhabitants are nowhere to be found. It is quiet. Too quiet. The population of St. Petersburg in the 1860s was, we are told, roughly 500,000 people, and yet there is not a soul in sight. Where is everybody? The long shadow of Alexander Column gives us a clue as to the time of the sun's journey above this region. Long shadows only occur during morning or evening. It must be morning, but it appears that no one has surfaced yet. If we travel 400 miles across to Moscow, we see the same thing. Empty, quiet streets. In 1860, Moscow shared a similar population with St. Petersburg, roughly 500,000 citizens. But again, where is everybody? What about the rest of the world during this time period? Edinburgh, Scotland, 1840s.
Pause it real quick. So, Gianmarco, you know Europe so well. Where was everyone 200 years ago?
Yeah, like, this is a very interesting question. I really like, hold on, just so you guys know, Jonah took atmospheric science in college, in case you guys didn't know that. But
is this hilarious to you?
Bro, I've heard you say this 800 times since this documentary came up. But Gianmarco knows, he is the authority of European history, which is why he's here today. He's the foremost professional author on the topic. So this is very curious to me. I don't know if this is curious to everybody else. I am genuinely.
I thought it was weird. Just to be honest, I thought it was kind of weird how there's nobody in any of these photos. It's a little weird.
This is interesting. So I would be very curious to go and look at this, right? So I don't know much about this specific topic, and so I cannot refuse it. But it's curious that he found pictures about it, and let's see where he goes. Let's see where he goes.
Just to be clear, let me. I pulled this up. I looked up, and Jonah, you can do this real quickly. I can share the link here in the chat. I did this just for the sake, and I don't think we have to do them all, but I Googled St. Petersburg. And I just pulled up St. Petersburg picture in the 1800s. And here's what's interesting. Can you guys see this?
Where are you putting this? WhatsApp chat? Private chat? Oh yeah.
Well, why does this website say visit Moscow? But okay, let's keep on going.
I mean, these are literally the photos he was showing.
This is in the photos that he was showing. So if you go to St. Petersburg, right? This is you look at a website and you go and you Google it. This is what pops up. Like, it's legitimately what pops up. So it's not like, oh shit. It's not like, hold on.
It's a little weird.
No,
I don't really.
What I would ask is, have you guys ever taken pictures right after sunrise? Like anywhere ever? Like I've done it. I know I've done it in San Francisco. It's pretty empty. So I don't know. I don't know if that is a thing.
It really looked like sunrise, though. Like, to be honest, to keep my open mind, that looks more like 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. Like, the shadow would be a lot longer.
Look at the shadow of this thing.
Good point.
That's
good point.
Pretty much midday.
That is not. You're right. Very good point.
So
it is really interesting. Does this website say anything about it? Do they mention where the
look? stpetersburg.com. It's the area of Alexander, 1855 to 1881. It gives a story of history. It has a painting, and then it just goes and shows all of the historical documents, right?
Now, that could be sunset or sunrise. That one right there. That could be
sunrise. Maybe. But so even if that's the case, this dove does. Yeah, right? And that is something that stands out. If you have a city that's this big, that should have this many people in it, where the hell is everybody? That's curious.
Sure.
It is curious.
Sure.
Okay, let's go back. Let's see what this guy has to say.
Copenhagen, Denmark, 1840s. Dresden, Germany, 1860s. Rio in Brazil, 1860s. Toronto, Canada, 1860s. Athens in Greece, 1860s. And then London, finally, people. And what about Paris? People.
There's some weird echoing happening with you. There's some weird echoing. Like, it doesn't sound fully right.
The first photograph, we are told, was created in 1822. The art of photography relies on methods of juxtaposition, of comparison and contrast to deliver its message and sentiment. In these old photographs, we do not find the same deliberate techniques of juxtaposition that contemporary photographers craft into their art, but rather we find natural contrasts that are so important and central to navigating through our deceptive history. Contrast is a phenomenon, natural or artificial, in which meaning is generated and conveyed through the comparison of two opposing elements. When looking at 1860s Russia, there is an immediate contrast between the lack of population and the sheer size of these cities. Even in the 19th century, both Moscow and St. Petersburg are enormous. The infrastructure found in the photographs could hold a population well into the millions. Why are the cities so vast if the population was only 500,000 in each? Furthermore, the official narrative gives us a population that increases in a linear fashion from 1764. Many of the buildings we see here were built years before the photograph was taken. Did the Russians just plan well in advance? But it's when the population is introduced into these photographs that a new contrast emerges
That actually is a very interesting point to mention as well. I think, and we don't have to go into the architectural engineering of this, but I would imagine that any culture or society today or throughout history is only going to build structures for the amount of population that they have. And they're going to continue.
Really interesting that I didn't think about. Do you think this is possible? I have no idea how cameras worked back then. If there was movement, like what would happen? Yeah, I don't see like a blur, but I also don't know how ancient cameras worked, or like not ancient, but like 1800s cameras. Like I have no idea.
I don't.
I'm just
think my guess.
You have to develop the film roll. You have to develop the film roll right now. I don't know what I was Googling actually, guys, was to find out when they figure out how to Photoshop them with the film roll, because you could put one picture on top of the other, say, and change some aspects of it. Like you didn't like a position, or you want a street empty, right? That could have been done by putting two pictures taken in the same spot, one of the on top of the other, and playing with the roll. So I was trying to see when that started happening, but obviously this is a very long time ago. So we'll have to see.
Gianmarco, do you know? Because I mean, you're a film guy. Do you know, like, if you were using an 1800s camera and people were moving, how would it show up on the film? Do you have any idea?
You would see it. You would see it.
You would see it with the blurry.
At the beginning they were using long exposures, so you would see it like some sort of ghost almost, right? They still do it to this day. So I think you would see it. These are clearly empty. The only thing is nobody was there, or they're being modified, and so they're fake. There's no, I don't think there's other options for this, because otherwise all the pictures would have to be taken at sunrise, right? Which was my first approach, but we clearly saw that it's not it.
Okay. Keanu, do you have anything else, or can we keep watching?
Yeah, no, I think that like that for me is really important. But the other part I think is, and I don't know if I can't remember if he goes into this more. Whether he does or doesn't, this is a very curious question, because the population of the city at this time didn't warrant the need for this much stuff.
So there is some editing. Look at the frame you're on here right now. Do you see the line?
Panoramic picture. It's a panoramic picture.
Okay, but do you see how the lines don't add up? Like look at the line, look at where the line is and how that building just doesn't equal that building.
Yeah, I caught this, and it's the same thing on the website that I just showed. Watch. You see it too. I think this is just them dealing with the panoramic picture, right? What they did is they took a panoramic picture, and then you can do this with your phone. If you take a panoramic picture and then try to put it into like a regular size, it's going to smush it in. And this will happen on a modern phone if you do it on your iPhone right now. And so I think this is just them with a what's the next one? This one right here. You see the line right here? This is just the panoramic picture.
That line adds up. Do you see how like I see what you're saying, but that lines up and makes the rest of the building in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, but look at what you're trying to accomplish. What it looks like here is, hold on.
Gianmarco, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no.
Like, do you see how like this line in the middle? God damn it, Keanu! Why did you move?
No,
You're like right on it, trying to hide the truth from us. What the fuck? It was right there.
Look, I'll play it when you see it in the panoramic. It looks like they're just piecing together the pictures.
You can see it here too. You can see it here too.
Yeah.
It's a little bit here. Here it's not as obvious as the other place.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, my father used to do this. So I know the process before there was any iPhone doing it. So that's how you used to do it. The thing is, I still think there is a chance, where when they develop the picture, they figure out, they maybe change some things. I don't know. I
just hate, Keanu, go back to where we just were, God damn it. Like I could have pointed out much more clear. This picture looks normal. Go to where we just were.
The Russians just the bombs. But it's when the population is introduced into these photographs that a new contrast emerges.
Here, pause.
Yeah.
Okay, that line is like, okay, some of it up there, but go lower. Go to the lower portion.
But that's what I'm saying. This is a building, so you can see that at least this overlap is probably about an inch in the photo itself, which represents probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 feet. So when you're dealing with a short building, right, you can see that you're cutting off the end, but when you're dealing with a long building, you realize you're not missing too much.
You know what? I just got
Your thing is that they were trying to make sure that building was shown correctly, so they fucked up the rest of it, basically, is what it says?
So
yes.
When is this supposedly being taken? Remind me again.
18
something.
Okay, so
1860s.
I gotta give credit to Jonah, because now that I think about it, I think when they first developed pictures, and I'm gonna Google it, but I think when they first developed pictures, they had super long exposures. Like today you can do a picture with a long exposure, and it's 1 minute, and you will see the stars doing all the flashes, right? Because it takes a long time and the sky is moving. But at the beginning, I think they were taking exposures that were like half a day. So in a half a day exposure, you don't see people. So I gotta Google that. That would explain a lot.
No, look into that. That's important.
Yeah.
That's
important.
Well,
anyways, all right. Anyways, we can keep going.
All right.
That is staggering. That is between the people and the environment itself.
But
it may be the reduced population numbers.
The thing we have to take into consideration is that for these same pictures, half of them have people. So,
Keanu, did you hear what I said?
No.
When you're playing it, there's some weird echo. It doesn't sound right.
I gotta mute my thing. So what we're gonna have to factor for is, Gianmarco, the same rule has to apply for the pictures with and the pictures without people, right? So if none of them have people, then it's one solution, but some do. So we have to factor for that. Okay.
Or it may be the monochromatic starkness of the black and white images, but they present to us something that we've lived amongst our entire lives and never paid any mind to. That is, the enormity and impossibility of the architecture. As we engage with the industry and act of tourism, we journey from place to place and observe, taking it all in, learning, hearing, and being told what we are looking at and how it came to be. And standing in front of a structure like the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, we might even exclaim, wow, how did they do this? But the moment, inextricably wrapped up in the busyness of the scene, perhaps prevents us from really asking that question with sincerity. Standing in front of a structure like the Arc de Triomphe while the crowd frantically takes pictures on their smartphones makes it all a reality. And we conclude, before being shoved away by new tourists, well, they had to have done it somehow because I'm here and looking at it. During our indoctrination at school, we are seldom shown old photographs of the grand cities scattered around our flat realm. And perhaps for good reason. Because when we marinate on images like this and are presented with the visual evidence of a very primitive Victorian people dotted around like grasshoppers within the shadows of the most magnificent, grandiose, brilliant architecture a human could ever imagine, we begin to have doubts. Indeed, how did they build this? The Arc de Triomphe is made from 36,695 cubic meters of limestone and weighs 95,407 tons, or just over 95 million kilograms. They tell us it took 12 years to build the giant arch in 2 different periods, between 1806 to 1814 and between 1832 to 1836. How did they transport this amount of limestone with the same horse and carts that we see in the photographs? Look closer at the 4 sculptures that adorn each of its sides. Look at the intricacy of the sculptures and the patterning of the ornamentation that frames the arch. Each section is perfectly repeated without any deviation or inconsistency. The first true power tool was not invented until 60 years after this arch was completed. They tell us this was crafted by hand. Is that even possible? And then there is the ceiling of the arch. Immaculate, 3D sculpted roses, perfect in their geometric symmetry. The nuance of the detail and finesse of each petal and cross-section borders is overwhelming. Look at the rest of Paris during this time. Again, a plethora of unbelievable, gigantic, and magnificent structures. The city's infrastructure glorious, and the people and their means of transport primitive, unsophisticated, and seeming not at all developed to the point of producing a city like this.
Let's talk about that for a second. That's a very, very interesting point. Like, the architecture is huge and just intricate and just beyond measure, but we're still walking around without electricity and in a horse and carriage. No power tools, no modern technology to speak of.
I think I could do it. I'm gonna throw it out there. I think I got it. Honestly, like, I got it, bro. Like, I'm just throwing it out there. Just me and my boys. We got like 60 years. I think we got it.
Yep.
No, but
Robert, this is an unthought out answer, in my opinion, because the only way what you're saying solves for this is if there's a train track within 25 yards of these locations. So
well, also, just like, I mean, we had like the cathedrals and shit were built in like the 1300s, the 1200s, the thousands, right? Like there are some buildings in here that weren't 18. Like the Arc de Triomphe was 1865, but Notre Dame was like, I think 1100 or something like that, right? Took them 120 years, right? Like, it wasn't easy. But
people will admit scientifically that we don't know how the pyramids were made, because we can't comprehend how we were able to move those stones that far. The same question applies to a lot of these structures, whether people want to acknowledge it or not. It's the same question, right? And when you're looking at this arc, forget the intricacy, right? And if you want to tell me that a hand sculpture can do that, fantastic. That's a different conversation we can get into. How are you going to do a mirrored image that face each other and perfectly, flawlessly mirror your flawless art forward and backwards? Cool. That's interesting. Google, because they don't have answers for a lot of these. A lot of these answers, Cap, are unexplained, right? Which is what we're discussing. So I guess what's curious to me is no. So what we're doing, Cap, just for the context, bro, we for anybody who just tuned in, we're just looking at we're doing a series called Questioning History. This is a documentary that was done that brought to question some things. I don't agree with all of these premises. Jonah doesn't agree with all of these premises, but what we're doing is just looking at it and just asking questions to see what we think. But yeah, the summary is, I just like, if the same questions, if we admit scientifically we don't understand how the pyramids were built, then that same lack of confidence applies to some of these structures. It just has to. And then but what we're not answering for is, why are these towns so huge when the populations didn't warrant cities this size? So forget the fact that we had a city this immaculate in opulence back when we were still without electricity, without modern plumbing, riding around in horse and carriages, right? Let's assume that we don't solve for those. Why would we build 10 times the amount of structures than we need for the society that we have, for the population that we have? Is that not curious to you, Jonah?
It's kind of hard for me to tell from these photos how many here's the hard part with this, Keanu, right? So I'm gonna flip it a little bit on you just to get your brain thinking, right? The hard part is what you're basically like, what you're asking is like, how could they have done this without electricity?
That's not what
I feel like, well, like, it's partially what you're asking. It's like, how could they have done this without any modern technology? No, that's what the guy's saying, like, at least, like, and no power tools, all this stuff, perfectly symmetrical, right? the hard part is that you and I actually don't know how hard it is. It looks hard, and it probably is hard, and it takes decades. But I don't know. Like, I just don't know what a human is capable of over decades. You know what I mean?
But that's not what I'm asking. Just to be clear, that the point that I'm trying to make there is the question that arises to me when I see something like this is, okay, of priorities that exist, right? Let's go all the way back and follow your hunter-gatherer evolutionary style.
Why big ass I am?
Throughout all of these evolutionary history, you created the environment that you needed for survival, period. Right? And it wasn't until you had the luxury to do extra stuff that you did extra stuff. By logic, what extra stuff are you going to do? And then the question that I would ask is, of all the extra stuff that we could be doing, why would we start with buildings that have points this freaking high into the sky for no reason whatsoever, and then we're going to go shit in a bucket?
So
human logic tells us that there is, if we're going to expand creativity, there has to be a utility to that creativity. And the fact that we started with tall ass towers
and their means of
opulent things with this really, really high things at the top, but we're still riding around.
You want my honest answer to that?
What's that?
Yeah. You want my honest answer to that?
Yeah, of course, bro.
I'm going to tell you my honest answer.
Yeah.
Let's say you're like Leonardo da Vinci here. You're 25. You're trying to bang out every fine Italian girl in Roma, right? Bro, you think that you say you built that? Bro, you're fucking everyone.
Bro, all right, yes.
No, but like, that's a very good point. That's a very good point.
You know why?
They were extremely religious, right? These guys were extremely religious. Why? Like, let's put it this way. First of all, when you see it, I think you'll see that some structures are not exactly looking the same. They're very close, right? But they're not mathematically the same because they were built by people, by hand, most of those. But maybe I'm wrong. Say that I'm wrong because it's possible. First of all, I believe these domes, this is them showing how Christian they are, right? This is like Jeff Bezos buying a $500 billion yacht and going to Monte Carlo.
Yeah, but I get that. But you know what he has first? Air conditioning, a toilet.
But back then,
I think back then it'd be harder to create air conditioning than to create that.
Keanu, that's a good point. But Keanu, you are the king. The technology you're not Elon Musk. You're the king. The technology at your disposal, you don't fucking know. You see what is happening. We have X, Y, and Z. People can build towers made out of stone. Why? Because we figure out how to build towers out of stones. Okay, get me the best guy, Gianmarco. Gianmarco, come in and build me a tower. I want the best tower. I saw what Jonah did. I want it bigger. Actually, I want it pointy because I like Gothic. Fuck Liberty. I want it pointy because I like Gothic because in the north, we like the dragons. That's what this is, bro. But there is something that could change because I wasn't there, even though I said that it was. Actually, I wasn't there. So there is something that could be behind. Like, I don't know the motives to the full extent, but to me, by logic, these guys are just showing who has the longest, yacht.
Longest what? The longest yacht.
It's a pretty big flex, Keanu. Like, if you're in charge of that.
This is going back to another. We circled back to a dating podcast. This is a sign.
I'm just saying, bro. Let's say, all right, let's just imagine ourselves. You, me, and Gianmarco are 16th century men, right?
Wait, hold on.
Gianmarco's Leonardo da Vinci.
Jess has to be hold on. Jess has to be the maiden that we're going after. Maiden.
Sure, whatever.
Okay.
He's the maiden, whatever. Like, I'm Michelangelo. You're
Leonardo, because he was the leader of the Ninja Turtles.
Donatello, right? And we're trying to figure out.
No, Leonardo.
Leonardo is Leonardo, dude. Sorry, bro. You got. Anyways, like what? Like, dude. Okay, we see that we can build buildings. You know what I mean? But like the idea of air conditioning isn't even in my brain. I don't even know that electricity exists, but I know that buildings exist, right?
We're framing the question wrong, though. Okay, Jess, let's use Jonah's logic. The artists are like, bruh, I'm just trying to smash. Okay, Jess, you're around in the 1400s, right? 1600, 1800s, right? One fair fellow walks up to you and he's got a sculpture, right? Little P, David, big arms, but he out there flexing with his sculpture. Then you got another guy. He shows up and he's got an ornate building, right? And then you got the third guy. He's got indoor plumbing and a shower. Who you chilling with at the end of the day, right? Dude with the shower or the dude with the little PP sculpture? This isn't a competition in my opinion, bro.
Yeah. I'm just saying that's because Jess said knows what it's like, how important indoor plumbing is and showers are. If no one's showering and no one has indoor plumbing, nobody cares.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I'm trying to get some of that ankle game. You know what I mean?
But they had sewers, right? They already had sewers for when this stuff was built, they had sewers for
there were societies in the 13 and 1400s with indoor plumbing. To be clear, this was not a new concept, sir.
They have fountains, they had sewers. But they couldn't figure out the toilet, man. They just couldn't figure out the toilet.
Couldn't figure out the toilet, but they could figure out this dude standing on the top of the fucking building.
Well, that's I believe that's literally people going crazy trying. It's like, you know how the hip hop culture is about hats and shoes? This is what that is. I have the best shoes. This is what it is. It's exactly that.
No, you know what this also is, Keanu? Right? Part of this also is like I was kind of just throwing out the joke of the flexing, right? And trying to get pussy, right? Like I think there were a little bit more motivations to it than that. You want my actual opinion, which is what I think most historians think, is like they think that this building, because it's a cathedral, they are literally doing God's work.
Yes.
By completing.
Yeah, but you can't. You're only talking about the cathedral.
Get into heaven. Wait, shit, I cut out what?
No, but you're only talking about the cathedrals. And that while I could see your argument for that, like I can't argue with that. Like I hear that. But that represents 10% of what we're looking at here, right? There's just so much more going on, right? Like I'm gonna mute this so that way I can play it. And we don't have to hear him while we're doing it. But
you're absolutely right. So take away that. All these buildings have a meaning. This is the beginning of diplomacy from the Greeks, right? Most buildings that you see in this picture in Paris, those, you had the government there, but there was no government. So there were the bureaucrats.
That's like a government building now.
Right. But back then, they were the bureaucrats or the, how do you call them? The Ibaroni, the barons working for the king. That's what it was. And so they wanted to feel like they were important too. So build this stuff for me, you slave. And it was a plutocracy back then. So, Leonardo was poor all his life, but he got to stay at the king's house in France, or he got to work for the king here and the king there and do all these beautiful things. But the guy was starving when he was alone, right? So it's, the artist was doing beautiful art, and he would, the more prestigious he would get to do this art, the farther he would go. But at the same time, he would just get paid some money. And so it was also a lifestyle thing for them to overachieve against each other. Donatello against Michelangelo against Raffaello.
You think that the mindset in this era was, of all of the things we can choose, right? Throughout history, human history, humans chose to focus on what was most important for survival, for mating, for expansion. And then we just slowly got away from that and started focusing on other things. And we felt that of all of the things that we could focus on, we're going to still hoop in buckets. We're not going to have indoor showers. we're not going to have functional transportation.
Yeah, but so you're absolutely right.
Okay, but here's my final question to you.
But let me just tell you this. Let me just tell you this before you go there. Just very quick. They're projecting power, right? They're not engineers. I didn't Google it, but I'm sure an engineer came out with the toilet solution and decided that air condition was happening. It didn't happen from a king. The king was very happy having the biggest house and projecting that France is the stronger country in Europe and Italy should shut up. That's what it was back then. Now, go for it. Sorry.
Let's see what.
Let's be real, Keanu. Come on. What? A girl comes to your house, you have a toilet, or you own that building. Come on, let's not fuck around here. It's the guy who owns that building. Look at that's like I just slammed my dick on the table.
Valuing that feeling of coming home after a long day and dropping the world's biggest deuce.
All right, would I rather be camping forever or have big buildings like that and all the women in the world? I don't know. This
is why the world's in its current status, Jonah. It's that thinking. That's the problem, right?
I don't know, dude.
Right. Let's see what let's see what he's.
Not at all developed to the point of producing a city like this. The roads are improperly paved and uneven. They are dirty and muddy. We also see buildings during this period in which the architecture aligns with the inhabitants. Buildings of misshapen proportions, less developed and refined, charming in their own way, but coarse in their use of wood and plaster. This is exactly the type of architecture we expect of a generation of horse and cart, a generation ignorant to the discoveries in technology that would follow in the years to come.
Quick response. What are your thoughts on that statement?
Sucks to be broke, bro. This is poor ass shit, dude. This ain't king shit. This is if you fucking poor.
I mean, social status back then, right? Like the closer you were working with the king, the closer you were working with the king, the bigger the building they would give you, and
Bro, like, let's be real. Those are just not houses. Those are literally just shacks. Like, they could do better than that in the 1800s. Like, that one doesn't even have like a roof on it, dog. These are just poor ass people who can't afford shit.
That's definitely a farmer just trying to build something so he can live because the king doesn't care. That's what I think it is, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
If you were the king, would you care, Gianmarco?
Well, depends. Depends how bad they talk about it.
That's why you can't trust some people with power, man. All right.
Yeah.
Furthermore, at the time of this photograph, the arch is roughly 40 years old since its completion. Yet can you see how worn some of the parts of the structure are? We see weathering on the stone that suggests the arch is much older. As we approach the late 19th century, we see that the people of Moscow have finally decided to leave their homes and venture out into the streets. The infamous Red Square, now bustling with life. St. Basil's Cathedral and the Spasskaya Tower dominate the frame of the square. The construction of St. Basil's Cathedral began in 1555 and was completed in 1561, a mere 6 years. It suffered a huge fire in 1737 and underwent restoration over a 20-year period. But look at it. What a structure. Almost unreal and like no other. It is composed of thousands of red bricks and tin sheet metal that has been shaped into the distinctive onion domes we see. Look closer at the intricacy of the domes. How did they bend metal to achieve such precision and perfection in the 18th century? And again, if they had the skills and dedication to build a wonder such as this, then why are the conditions of the road so poor and covered in mud? We see these incredible structures and buildings everywhere in 19th century photography. We have the wondrous Crystal Palace of London, a monstrous structure with the greatest area of glass ever seen in a building and all constructed before England had automatic glass manufacturing. We have Westminster Abbey and Parliament. We have the old Euston Arch, constructed out of pure sandstone in 1837, and streets unpaved and full of mud. Why did these people not prioritize the streets they walked upon? The Flower Curve.
He's brought that up a lot. All right, that's a decent question. You guys are talking about opulence. You're talking about how much flexing, buildings, all of these different things. You're talking about rich versus poor. You're talking about the king. Then it stands to reason that exact same logic, at least in the city centers, why not put out roads, cobblestone, something, right? Rome had it. Why not put stuff out there so that way you can at least not be walking in the mud in all of these places?
Bro,
I think just for that.
Don't get you pussy, dude. Come on, bro. Are you joking right now? You think roads get you pussy, dude? I'm joking and I'm not joking. Like
you don't actually
throughout the city, that's getting you laid, dude, versus that huge thing, dog. Like, let's be real. I'm the king. I'm getting fucking carried in a carriage. I don't give a fuck. I'll let my little servant squires be on their knees in the mud carrying me. I want to make sure I got these big ass buildings so the women know what it is.
The worst part is I believe you actually see the logic in this. That's
my personal opinion.
That's a super interesting point, bro. But I think this, right? Rome had it. Why the rest didn't have it? Now, in Italy, we make fun of the Germans, for instance, or the French. No, the French, I think they had it at one point. Just because they learn all this stuff way, 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 way later. And now they act like, oh, we do the most sophisticated cars in the world, when it took them forever to catch up to the Italians. So the point here, I think, is that these guys, as John is saying, they were trying to get people to follow them, right? So it could be a religious motivation. It could be leadership of the king motivation. But the first thing you build is something masterful, so that everybody counts and venerates you.
I don't like, respectfully, we are all speculating. None of us were there 200 years ago, except for Gianmarco, or 400 years ago, or 1,000 years ago. You just can't tell me that during the immaculate construction of all of these fantastic things that nobody has the question. We walk in mud every single day, and this really ornate building, once we get inside, trekked with mud that we got to clean every single day, right? There is a point where you're saying, if we already have all of these supplies, we have the stone, we have the bricks, we have the material, at the very least, for the rich folk, we're going to pave these streets. We're going to put something down so that way you're walking in the same opulence that you're existing. That's just a logical conclusion.
Yeah. So, but like, if you go to Rome, they're all made of stones made the same way. Like it was a specific way they did it, right? Like, it's beautiful to see, right? So what I think in this case happened is architects back then, they were a commodity. These guys, I mean, we can go, and I can go and do your research about this. I remember it from school, so it was my professor teaching me this stuff. But yes, back then, the architects were a commodity. So everybody would trade these architects, and then other people learned what was going on. And then the streets came. Like the Romans used to say, tutte le strade portano a Roma, which means every road takes you to Rome. So the farther you go from Rome, the less developed the streets were, because that was a Roman technology that not everybody picked up right away. So maybe it took them some time. Now, here we're in the 1800s, so I am questioning myself, right? But I do think that there is something there where, I don't know, maybe they changed it, maybe they didn't like it. Like, if you go to Brussels, they have the same floor that you would find in Rome. But Brussels was born in 1300, like 1400, something like that. Rome is before
the 1300s, and in the 1400s, and in before that, we had roads. But they decided to come over here and universally in Russia, in London, in the Americas, all of these countries, they decided to build all of these big buildings, and universally, nobody thought roads would be a functional idea. And nobody here right now thinks that that's a curious conclusion for everybody to come to.
Russians are bears, bro. Like, I don't want to be like, they used to be called bears and Vikings, bro. These guys, they're from
you ever seen Russian before, dude, Keanu? They're fucking animals, dude.
These guys in the 1400s,
mud, bro.
They had something going on basically in the 1400s. So in the 1800s, it's 400 years that they exist. It's 400 years that they exist. London was built in multiple times. It was a bunch of villages, and then it became a city. Now it's a cool city, beside the crime. It's a really cool city. But I'm telling you, it used to be a bunch of villages, and then they melt them all together. For Paris had the Vikings and had multiple invasions, and they had to constantly rebuild and rebuild and rebuild. So it would make sense that they would hire the best architects. So I'm thinking there is some truth in what you're saying, but we got to check back from country to country and history to history. If you show me something like this in Italy, I don't know what to say, right? But if you show it to me in Moscow, like, they were 400 years old in the 1800s. Like, we were 1,800 years old in the 1800s.
Also, giving a more serious answer than you get more pussy from a big ass building. I'll give a more serious answer too. You have to think about
400 years ago, they could do this, but they couldn't pave their streets. Okay.
No, but the thing is, I don't think they couldn't do it. It's also about, okay.
That's what vodka would do.
What is the point of a paved road, Keanu? Like, why would we make a paved road versus just one of those roads? Like, give me some reasons so we can think about it.
Things, right? Like, if you want to talk about the 1800s, and during that time, forget engineering, forget buildings. From a human standpoint, this was the era of people wanting to be civilized. Civilization was all the rage. Watch any Bridgerton-esque type thing. Clean, refined, well-dressed was everything back then. It was everything. Right? So if you want to use your same psychological, if you want to go down to a psychological standpoint, we're talking about why would somebody make a decision? I can tell you right now, if you're in the realm of the type of person who puts hours of effort into putting a girdle on so you can dress to the nines, and you're ordering the finest linens from all over, the finest people, you know what you don't want? To walk outside and look like a dog that just ran through the mud. Everything was about status. Everything was about appearance. So if for nothing else, to keep their extremely expensive clothes clean, right? And the fact that they spent as much money as they did on getting fabrics from all over the world so that they can have the nicest, cleanest clothing, that should be enough indication that being able to keep that clothing clean would be among a top priority. That's just a logical conclusion.
You know what you
sure.
wanted?
I was going to go with, sorry,
Jonah, go for it. Go for it.
I just want to finish this point and then do it. I was thinking of more of this stuff is what I thought you were going to say. Faster travel is the one that I was thinking of, right? Because faster travel, ground not being soft, stops the dust holes. All of these things have to do with the speed of travel. That's generally the point of paved roads in general, is it lets you get places quicker. That's generally the purpose of a road, right? So the kind of the question in my head is that for Rome, they needed roads because they owned fucking everything. So they needed to be able to get troops and shit from one place they owned to the other. Because if an invasion's happening in France, they need to get back to fucking Egypt, right? Decently quickly, right? For these civilizations, right? Russia was pretty big, so it would make sense that maybe it probably still would be useful for Russia to have this. I don't remember how big Russia was in the 1800s. I think it was pretty solidly big, but still, like, it wasn't like that. It might not be as necessary as you think it is, because the reason that we have so many paved roads now, especially, I think the vast majority of that really started even in America once cars started becoming a thing. because cars really fuck up on dirt roads. While horse and carriage, you can generally get around on a dirt road, right? So that's my more serious answer as to why it's like it was. I don't think it was as big of a problem for them as you would think it would be. That's my honest interpretation. I may be wrong, but that's my thought process behind it.
And also, what do you guys think about, that's interesting on both sides. What do you guys think about the fact that, okay, the king wasn't interested on making the roads for whatever reason. There was no tax system that would allow you to figure out how to build the roads. Like, it was either the king or whoever's in charge wants it or nothing.
So there wasn't a tax system to do that, which is arguably drastically less expensive than any of these structures. But there was the tax structure for this.
There was no, this was no, think about this building.
Now, it's about whatever the king wants, is what Gianmarco's trying to say.
Yeah, the guy would build around his plaza, his buildings, everything around it. Like, look at Firenze, the city where I'm from. Man, it's a small city that kept on growing, right? But these guys, they built the Duomo. It was spectacular, so you would come and see it. The doors are in gold and all this stuff. There is marble in the fucking, the floor is marble, but then, you keep going farther from there. Nobody cared. Now you have cement,
But to say this, though, Keanu, I do know what you're saying in the sense of, like, it is interesting in the sense of, like, this does seem like a much harder project than a road, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And I do agree with you on that, that creating that is definitely a harder project than creating a road. In my personal opinion, what makes the difference is the motivations of the people who actually have the power and the money to do all of this, right? That's why I feel like we have that, That's my personal opinion, but I do get your point in that sense being weird.
All right, let's see what this guy says.
Such as this, then why are the conditions of the road so poor and covered in mud? We see these incredible structures and buildings everywhere in 19th century photography. We have the wondrous Crystal Palace of London, a monstrous structure with the greatest area of glass ever seen in a building, and all constructed before England had automatic glass manufacturing. We have Westminster Abbey and Parliament. We have the old Euston Arch, constructed out of pure sandstone in 1837, and streets unpaved and full of mud. Why did these people not prioritize the streets they walked upon? The Frauenkirche, the domed masterpiece of Dresden, Germany. Its intricate and opulent splendor in direct contrast with the beat-up wagons and horse-pulled carts of the people below, a people dependent on the bare necessities, a people completely dwarfed by its size and majesty. The Library of Parliament in Ottawa, Canada, built over a period of 17 years. The first major settlers arrived in 1800, and at the time of construction, the city's population was under 20,000. Would a grand, glorious library really be a priority for settlers? Why does the building look like it's been cropped out of Europe and pasted into Canada?
Like, that's pretty interesting.
Turn of the
That
century,
is pretty weird.
30 years before Bosch.
Like, I will say that's pretty weird to build that fucking building in a town of 20,000 people. Like, why would you do that? Like, that seems so incredibly unnecessary for a town of 20,000 people.
Yeah,
I'll throw that out.
That makes no sense because, I don't know. I don't know the history of Canada that well, honestly.
I think what's curious about this is, like, when you look at this, one, this doesn't look like a whole building. This looks like the roof of literally every other building we've seen, right? It's like literally it's the top. All of these buildings have similar tops, right? And they all had this, the ones that had the domed tops all had that kind of same thing, but for whatever reason, wait, hold on. Oh, shit.
This guy, dude.
What? Let's go. I screwed that thing up. I screwed it up.
You were around there.
Here it is. So this looks like the top of all of those buildings. It doesn't even look like the whole building. It looks like if this was an apocalyptic movie, this is just the top of it, and the rest of it is like underneath water or something like that.
Yeah,
That's
it's interesting. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But like, how does this happen? Like, how can something like this happen that you get so much dust, like to that level? And yeah,
that's the interesting part. I mean, this is the part, and I don't know because I don't remember exactly what he says. He's going to get to his point. But what I do think is curious, if I'm putting together the message that he's trying to put out here, is these things kind of do look out of place, right? If we go back to the beginning videos when we were talking about St. Petersburg in Russia, what was the population of Russia in, I'm going to look this up.
Yeah.
What was the population of Russia in 1850?
$68 million people. Jesus Christ. It says 68 million people to me. What does it say to you?
Interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, I don't know. So maybe there was enough population. If that number's right, maybe there was enough population to warrant.
I mean, that's Google. What Google is saying. I don't know. One would have to go and look at the archives. That's where you actually.
Let's keep watching the video, so they don't just watch us Googling.
Years before Bosch economized the power tool, we have the old Penn Station in New York. Look at the size of this. Completely mind-blowing proportions. As we can see here in the photograph, each octagonal sculpted pattern on the arched dome ceiling is larger than one individual human. Look at the gigantic columns and detailed asantha sleeves decorating the tops of each pillar. They tell us this station took 6 years to build. 6 whole years. Yeah, right. Why are we so gullible? Even without access to modern power tools, printable construction pieces.
That's crazy. What's up, Julie? 6 years seems a little bit ambitious to be able to finish something like this. Is that accurate?
So when was this built? Yeah. Like, I don't even know. This I'm a little ignorant.
What is this? Is this Central Station?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When was this built?
It was built pretty early, like late 1800s, early 1900s.
Yeah, I have no idea if this could take a decade or two to build. I have no idea.
When was Grand Central Station built?
I mean, it's done very masterfully. Like
1871.
Yeah, man. We didn't even have a constitution back then.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting that they were able to build something this big in 5 years.
I mean, I have no idea. The thing that's hard for me is, like, I don't know how quickly someone can build something or not. Like, I truly have no idea is the issue. Like, because like I personally have never built jack shit. I have built Legos. That's literally the most building that experience I have, right? I know it takes about a year to build a house based on real estate. After that, I have no fucking clue how long these things are supposed to take or not take. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think like we're gauging it today. With all of the access to the technology that we have today. Back then, once again, they didn't have cars. They didn't have automobiles. There's a decent chance they didn't even have electricity while they were building this. So to be able to do whatever they were able to accomplish, get the glass up here, do all of these different things, all of these ornate structures, right? The designs, the sculptures, they made it this tall. And if that's accurate, that those little designs on the top, these little little things right here are bigger than a human being. To be able to do this in general is extremely impressive. To be able to do it in 5 years without any type of technology seems a little bit interesting.
Yeah, I feel it. I don't know.
All right, let's see what he's saying.
All of this is stones, right? This is a lot of stones. So
looks like limestone, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta work. I'm not a fix and flipper, guys, but I think working stone takes a little bit, especially if you do it like that. Look at those columns.
Like a mason to work on to have stone stuff happen. You need like a legit mason. You need like a specialized guy.
Like you would need. How many people worked on this? 1,500, 15,000, 20,000? Like this is a lot. And how many people had these skills?
Grand Central Station is pretty fucking cool. Have you guys been in Grand Central Station?
Yeah, one time.
I've been like a couple times in my life because my family's mostly in New York. It's a pretty impressive building. It's like, whoa, where the fuck did I end up being? You know?
Yeah, exactly. Like, how many guys knew how to do this and got hired at the same time? And also, how much did they get paid? I want to know.
Here's my question. My question is, what is like these things? How did they design this? Because was this like a template of sorts?
I think
there was probably an architect.
No. I'm talking about these like little things. Like, is this? I don't know anything about this stuff, so I'm gonna sound real stupid right now. But was this designed? So masons, I'm assuming masons are sculptors, right? That would be my conclusion. But you look at what's that?
People who know how to do stonework. That's all a mason is.
So, but here's my question. Do you use templates for this? Because these are all identical to one another.
You have
like it would stand to reason that if you're doing this by hand, they're not going to be identical like this. There's going to be differences. There's going to be like, but these are 100% identical. So was there a template of, so like, how did you do that?
Yeah, so that, and then they're curved. Like they're on a curve. I mean, the leaves, I think you do by hand. The leaves on the columns, right? The leaves. That's the only thing that I can tell you. I think you just do it by hand and you try to figure it out.
Yeah, I don't think machines existed, though.
They didn't have machines for this. They didn't have precision machining in 1895 or whatever. Like,
what if they built something and just use it as a,
Yeah, so for context, for everybody who just jumped in here, what we're doing is we're watching this documentary. I don't agree with the premise of a lot of this documentary. Obviously, Jonah and Jamarco don't. But some of the things that he says is curious. To give you guys a little bit of context, this guy doesn't believe that these buildings were built by the people who claimed to build them. That's his conclusion.
You know what they did? Sorry, I didn't keep going.
Yeah, no. He believes that these buildings existed well before, and that the people in the 1800s and the 1900s that claimed to have founded them didn't actually build them. They just discovered them and claimed them as their own. So, what happened?
You know how I think they did it? How they made it exactly the same? They took a big piece of paper. They did one. They took a big piece of paper, just, stenciled it, just put it on the next part.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And then just
traced it.
They traced it.
What happens when you're chipping if you screw up the paper, though? Your whole thing's done. Tear the whole building down.
You murder that man.
And
you get another piece of paper and restart.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
That guy, because he's a fucking asshole. Because you paid him like $100,000 to do some mason work, and that's how it happened.
I mean, I feel like people to do that roof, to that ceiling. I mean, people might have died trying to do that. Like,
probably a few people died.
Yeah,
most likely.
Oh, tons, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So,
all right, you want to keep watching? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, give us your thoughts. So, massive cool fact. Keep saying they had massive machines. I would love for you to send a link of the machinery that they had during the making of this thing. I genuinely don't know. It's my knowledge that the first 100% people died falling off the scaffolding for sure. I think pretty much look at the Hoover Dam or any of those things. Like, there's people that literally are in the Hoover Dam. I heard a story one time of a dude that fell into the Hoover Dam. Something fell on top of him, And basically, they just called his family and were like, they said goodbye to him there. And that was it. Like, that was it.
That's so crazy.
But there's tons of stories like that.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Humanity was
When were what am I looking for? Like electric tools, power tools. Let's call it power tools of any sort created.
Like precision machines, you mean? Pre-electric tools?
Yeah. We'll look that up differently. Let's play this thing.
Yeah, let's keep it on that.
And detailed asantha sleeves decorating the tops of each pillar. They tell us this station took 6 years to build. 6 whole years. Yeah, right. Why are we so gullible? Even without access to modern power tools, printable construction pieces, and trained technology, we could not reproduce this today. And more.
Just really interestingly, going back to the like, get rid of your mouse for a sec. Try to get that play bar to go away. I'm trying to. I don't know how you can get the play bar to go away. Try to move your mouse off of it. Or
it
something.
Won't do it if it's not playing. It's stupid.
That's super annoying. Well, while it's playing, look at the people in this photo. I think it's really interesting. There's like ghost apparitions, which I'm curious if that's like from.
That's from.
That's like what movement. Like that answers the movement question we had earlier. You know what I mean?
Good point.
So
that's a good
press
point.
play, but look at that.
Look at Nathan's point, right? Your city's been working on a train for 12 years. Nobody was buried in it. Okay. What was it that people were buried in? That they were just lost in the cement of something? Maybe it's something else that I'm thinking of, Julie.
That was the
Great Wall of China.
Did you just say vagina?
That was
the Great Wall of China.
Oh. That makes way more sense. I don't think the Great Wall of China would have had people buried in it. Those were just I don't even know.
No, they did. No, that one I do know. They actually did have people buried in it. Like the king was
out of the Great Wall. Seriously?
Yeah, that's Emperor was like, we need this ship built now. Mongols are effing us up. Work till you die.
So, at least my confusion had a benefit. But like, look, this is a very like it's 2020 something, right? And 12 years. This is an interesting point that they did this quickly, and still it takes us forever to build anything. But right here is where you're talking about like one of the ghost things, and right over here, right, Jonah?
Yeah. I just found it interesting in comparison to our people like conversation we were having earlier.
Our access to modern power took 6 years to build. 6 whole years. Yeah, right. Why are we so gullible? Even without access to modern power tools, printable construction pieces, and crane technology, we could not reproduce this today. And more importantly, we don't reproduce this type of architecture today. The official liars of our world have an umbrella term for this type of architecture that we see in North America. They call it historicism. Historicism is a term coined to describe a style of architecture that is revival in nature, or in other words, copies the style of another period in time. The grand arches and buildings with giant columns we see are built in the classical or Greco-Roman style, and the cathedrals are built in the Renaissance and Gothic styles of medieval Europe. Components of these particular styles of architecture feature large spires, arched windows, towers, turrets, domes, arcaded arches, sculptures, enormous doors, circular geometric windows, columns, clock faces, and bell towers. Traces of this impossible architecture are literally found everywhere, in every city and across our world today. Some preserved and maintained, like the Parisian Arc de Triomphe and Notre Dame, and others lost and long forgotten to time, like the Euston Arch and the Old Penn Station in New York. We as a people travel miles to take our own photographs of these wonders. But the photographers of the 19th century gift us with something something they would never have expected to give a future generation: perspective. We see a primitive people against a backdrop of clearly advanced architectural infrastructure. The official historians of the world tell us tales of Darwinian evolution and progression between time periods. The people that came after were always more advanced in their ways, refining and redefining the methods of the generation that came before. If the height of innovation and industry during the 19th century was still the horse and car as a means of travel, then, as these photographs tell us, this style of architecture was just as impossible for those living in the centuries before it. Anyone with a predisposition for thinking and questioning can immediately sense when looking at these photographs that something is rotten in Denmark, that something is off with the mainstream historical narrative, that something is not adding up. In a panoramic image of San Francisco in 1877, we see a collage of historicist architecture. We see columns adorning the entrances to very regal buildings that stand out like sore thumbs from some of the timber shacks surrounding it. We see Gothic spires and towers in the distance. We see domed cathedrals and buildings. We also see just how sprawling and huge the city has become. In 1846, there were under 500 Mormon settlers living on the area of land in which we now call San Francisco. It was frontier land and ready for the taking. Between 1848 and 1849, with the start of the California Gold Rush, the population increased from 1,000 people to 25,000 people. 28 years later, this panorama was taken. The population at this time, we are told, was getting close to 200,000. Who in their right mind would believe this story? Does this look like a city of 200,000 people?
You're from San Francisco, Jonah. Thoughts on that, bro?
The hard part is I have no idea, because I mean, this was so long ago, right? I am from San Francisco. When I was born in San Francisco, there's over 20 million. There's like, not 20, there's like 6 or 7 million people that live in San Francisco. So I don't know. Like, it does look like a lot, right? It definitely looks like more buildings than you would need for 200,000 people. But it's just hard for me to tell, right? It is interesting. It is interesting how big these cities are for the supposed population.
If I'm looking at this open-mindedly and I'm being objective, right? I've never been to San Francisco.
You love it, dude.
Here's what I'm sure
I'd take you to Castro. I'd take you to the Castro district immediately, and I'd be like, "Let me show you how crazy this shit can get."
And I can get myself like a nice vegan burger. And you can show me how to
have a vegan burger. You're gonna see a naked gay dude with a strap on walking around. It's pure.
We got in Albuquerque, just to be clear. So,
do you?
there's this one old dude that since I was a kid, he walks around. He wears nothing but a pair of jean cutoff shorts and like Native American like feathers on his arms. That's it. That's all he wears. And that's all he's ever worn. And he just walks around the city since I was a kid.
All right. Maybe San Francisco is not as special as I thought it was.
It's really not. No, but here's what's interesting. Like for me, when you look at, I don't know what was happening in San Francisco. I really don't. But
which is gold rush.
So you look at the gold rush, bro. A lot of those people that were coming over, if you look at the bulk of the society of the people that would be used for the labor required to do a job like this, those people were all digging for gold. So we not only do you have to account for, like, if I'm trying to be open-minded and account for this guy's question, like, let's look at what he's saying. Look at the vastness of this city, right?
Yeah,
this is
a weird one for sure.
Yeah,
like I feel like this is like, if I'm looking at this, because this literally looks like, I don't know where this guy is. I mean, this is such an old city that it doesn't look anything like this anymore. but I'm trying to like geolocate where he could be taking this photo from. He could be taking this from the Twin Hills, which is like this part of San Francisco where there's two hills that like get much higher than everything else. And yeah, this seems
But like this like I see Victorian style there, right? But I don't know when the Victorians were even in that area. Like I have no idea.
This is definitely Victorian style, right? This right here is Victorian
there's
style.
still a lot of Victorians there to this day, right? Like the Victorian style of houses built back then are still like there to this day.
But
I don't know if that was a stylistic thing, but yeah.
It's a huge city for 20,000 people. You said how many people were there?
200,000. Yeah, because when I'm looking at this, let's just account for the amount of time that had to elapse. First of all, right, let's just go for time that it takes to create a structure. So let's just look at the sophistication of a building like this, or a building like this, or this building over here, or really any of these buildings, because these are all pretty decently sophisticated buildings. On top of that, they're sophisticated buildings built on one of the most unstable structures of any major city that I've ever seen, because the rows are all like this. I don't know anything about engineering, but I would guess that you have to be extremely advanced and specialized in your skill set to be able to build buildings of this magnitude in this type of an area, which means that and I'm just thinking this off the top of my head as I'm saying it, but one, you had to get a bunch of people to San Francisco. Okay. To Julie's point, people were coming from all over the world. Fantastic. You have to have enough skilled people to be able to have the engineering skill set to be able to build this. One person can't do that. This is way too vast of a city to build this quickly over this short period of time.
More than one person, for sure.
So then the question you have to ask is, how many qualified architects and engineers do you need to be able to get this done, right? Then
like how many years also? How many years do you do this? Like 10 years, 20 years?
I don't know. We got to see if he says how many years this took to get built. But if I'm just throwing out questions, the question I ask is, if the population at this time is 200,000, and let's say it was over the course of, however many years that they built this, the people that were here, people actually worked, no cell phones. That's probably had something to do with it for sure. No social media. But the people that were working, a lot of them weren't actually working in the city. They were working at the mines, right? There was a decent amount of people that were working in the city or in the mines or in the hills looking for gold, right? So then how many of the 200,000 people need to be qualified architects or engineers to be able to take on a task of this magnitude before there's any modern communication and technology? How many of those have to be skilled enough to be able to build in an advanced way like you would need on roads and hills like San Francisco? And then the question would be, how long does it take to build one of these buildings, let alone, what is this, thousands of them? That for me just seems interesting. I don't know what that means, but it does definitely raise some questions, especially when the population doesn't even warrant. So why are you going to put that much effort into building a city that you don't even need that much space for?
Do you think it was illegal aliens labor?
But that's kind of the point, Julie. Like, that's all the less reason to have this many buildings. So if the point that this guy is trying to make is that we didn't have the manpower or the population to require a city of this size, then why the hell did we have it? Especially since a lot of the people were miners and all these, they weren't even living in town. Yeah, these are interesting.
Also, most miners didn't live in San Francisco. Like, the gold was not in San Francisco. It was like more closer to like Sacramento and like that area, to be honest.
Less reason to need housing or buildings of this magnitude.
It was more of a trading port, but I don't know how much trade we were doing with like China at this point, right? Like around the turn of the century, that like, I'll say this much. Here's what I do know, because I actually do real estate deals in San Francisco. Most of the earliest buildings are like 1890 to 1900. There's any building before like 1890 or 1900, there just aren't any. So I don't know when this photo was taken, but that's something to consider in the sense that it's even more interesting that probably the entire city was rebuilt, probably due to earthquakes in that period from like 1890 to 1910. I mean, that's when the great earthquake happened, was like 1914 or something, or 1912.
I wish we had some construction people here. So let's say you have a population. Okay, we know that the population during this time was around 200,000, which means that that's at the time this was built. So we know that before that, there were fewer people, right? Because we don't know of any mass exodus from San Francisco. So let's call it anywhere from 100 to 200,000. How many of those are children, right? How many of those at that time, women were not working in this regard? I don't know that they were. I know in some cities they were. I don't know if women were doing manual labor in San Francisco.
They were not.
Okay.
They just weren't.
There were some cities where women were working in the mines. They were doing all that. Definitely that was during the Depression where that was common, but there were other parts in the 1800s that was common as well. So I don't know, but let's just assume that of the 200,000, let's just call it 130,000, 150,000 of those are adults. Let's call it another 75,000 are men. Okay. Of those men, let's say there's that many people, 100% of them are not working construction because you have to have people doing various tasks, right? So then the question is, here's my question. If we're using this number, let's say there's 10,000 people available to do construction. Okay, that sounds like a fair number to me. And if somebody in here knows construction, please tell me, because I'm literally guessing. How long does it take to build this many buildings from the late 1700s to the late 1800s, over the course of 100 years, right? Could you build this many buildings with that many people?
Well, how much gold did they find in that period? And I guess I'm not trying to be funny here, but like maybe the Chinese. I have no idea. Like I have no idea. This seems like
they were Chinese workers coming over, but then they were just put into like railroad work, basically.
A lot of railroad work.
Yeah,
but they were doing stuff. I genuinely don't know. I don't know enough about construction, but here's the thing, right? Like to Nathan's point, right? He's got one train station that's been built for 12 years. Right. There's a building in Orlando that's like the world's most hilarious building. They've been building that thing for like 30 years. That thing's still not done. And this is modern technology, right? It can take a very, very long time. At the very, very fastest right now, you get a track house. What are you putting a track house up in? 90 days?
Yeah,
right?
Probably.
So let's call it 90 days. I mean, if you have the manpower, you can't do all of these at once. So it's like, even if you were able to build it in 90 days, well, this isn't a track house. These are stone structures, right? Like these are very, very, very.
Some of them are wood. Some of these are wood. Not all of them are stone. Like the church is stone, but those houses are probably wood and Victorians, most likely.
In your opinion, in the 1700s and in the 1800s, and I'm guessing, I have no idea. How long does it take to build Julie Sam brick too? How long does it take to build something like this?
I have no idea. The thing is that my only point of reference is how long it takes to build a new build now. And that's usually like a year to 2 years. Yeah. But I don't know how long it took back then. My only point of reference is what it is right now.
I'm gonna take a wild guess, and I think 100 years to build all of this back then is too little. I think it's too little.
I don't know enough about construction, but if it takes a year or two to build any of these structures with the amount of manpower and the tools, I think that something like this, a year or so, is probably reasonable for the resources that were available at the time. There's thousands of buildings, and there wasn't that many people, right? Like, how do you do that in 100 years? I just don't know how you do that. I don't know how you get anywhere near this. Now, again, we don't know what we don't know. Obviously, these buildings are all here. And obviously, the story that we're told about our history is that they were built in this time period. This is what we know. But I do believe that this picture does lend, and this question does lend credence to this guy's question at the very least, that this, like, if I'm looking at this objectively, and I'm not just assuming that because I was told something that it's true, this is an interesting question. Like, it really does beg the question, how you build this much stuff in 100 years with a population that was well under 200,000 when this construction started, knowing that only a fraction of that are the type of labor that are going to be able to actually do this type of work, right? I mean, you got some pretty big build. Look at this building over here, right? This is pretty big. No,
Yeah,
what we're saying is we don't know, right? But for me, there's nothing intellectually sound about just arrogantly believing something because I was told that it was true, right? Like for me, the greatest form of intelligence is asking questions, even if everybody's telling you that they know the answer, right? I think that's not. In my opinion, it's naive just to believe it because there's a picture on a wall that's true. I wasn't there 100 years ago, right? I've seen lots of people tell me stuff that wasn't true. We go around every day with people that tell us stuff that's not true. You know what I mean? Like pharmaceutical company said a lot of things weren't true, right? So I don't know. I my answer to your question, Julie, is I have no idea. I wasn't there. I was not alive.
Let's keep watching. I want to hear his final point so that people can hear his final point. You got it muted.
Who in their right mind would believe this? Does this look like a city of 200,000 people without any modern technology, power tools, automatic manufacturing, electric motors? A people in a strange, unfounded land, just making their mark. Do we really believe that a burgeoning people built this entire city in just 30 years? And again, such quietness, such stillness. This is a photograph of an empty city. Where are all the people? The shadow of the post here tells us that it is not the early hours of the morning. Short shadows only appear toward midday. A city of this scale at noon should be bustling with life. But there is not a single person in the shot of this panorama.
What happened? You said something, Jonah?
No, I was muted. Nobody said anything.
Oh,
you're hearing voices.
The only life we see is that of a horse without any master in sight. It seems highly unlikely that all the people were told to stay indoors because a cityscape photo shoot was taking place. And this silent scene becomes all the more eerie when we consider that there is intention behind the lens. Someone was there, standing at a vantage point and taking this photograph. But who? And for what? And what are the chances that in the 19th century, during similar decades, we see deserted Russian, European, and North American cities photographed like this? And then only a few years later, we find the same locations bustling with people. A people clearly incapable of building the architecture found in these cities. And what to do with these photographs? If we accept the narrative and these strange anomalies, then we stop here and get back to our busy lives. But the narrative we've received is not the truth. And we shouldn't accept any narrative, no matter how official and certified it is, unless it makes sense. The people we see in these photographs, and we shouldn't accept any narrative.
This building is crazy. Like everything else aside, I'm looking at the details in this building. This is insane.
Bro, this is the Duomo di Firenze. I grew up there, man. That's
in this building? City. You grew up in this building? Is this why you're so arrogant about European culture?
This is in my city, man. Like, you know, this is it.
I honestly, Gianmarco, if I grew up in a building like this, I would probably be as arrogant about Italy as you are.
No, but like literally stuff here. I mean, every European then is arrogant for you, bro. Like marble, there's marble everywhere, and the doors are made out of gold. Like this is Duomo di Firenze is really cool, man.
Duomo di Firenze. Say it again.
Duomo di Firenze. This is Florence, right? Duomo di Firenze, the Dome of Florence. I want to call it in English because we have to. But Duomo di Firenze is really, really cool place.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I just like it when you say it.
That's man, it's a beautiful city to visit. Very small, but beautiful city to visit. Town. It looks like a town because this is the biggest skyscraper, so to speak. This thing in the middle of it. That's very interesting.
No, this is like breathtaking. Just like glancing through this thing. I've never looked at this.
Europe has some crazy shit. I'm not gonna lie. Europe has some crazy.
I remember even in Sicily, right? Like just random places off of the coast, like in Catania, you just see random big, just cathedral type buildings and stuff like that are just super, super pretty. I mean, that's Europe overall, right? I think that's just a lot of Europe. But this is just crazy, just looking at the details in this thing. I know this is not the point of what this guy's trying to tell us here, but I just thought this is crazy to look at. Anyways, congratulations on being Italian, bro. If you have no other reason to be proud about being Italian, this is it. This and pizza. This and pizza.
Appreciate it. I mean, let's see. Like, you know, this is I don't know how he did it. I am confident he did it, but do I know the technology used?
You're telling me one dude did this?
No, so I Googled it earlier. One guy did the architecture of it, and then it was built by others, right? So if you Google, but I can send it to you.
Okay, yeah, we'll play it. We'll play it. I just wanted to stop and talk about this, and I wanted to hear you say the name. Say the name one more time.
Duomo di Firenze.
Okay, thank you. All right.
No matter how official and certified it is, unless it makes sense. The people we see in these photographs and their early ancestors could not have built the magnificent architecture we see. It is an impossibility. Come on, jump in. We must venture further into these cities and look a little closer. There must be some clues waiting to be uncovered that helps us understand why these cities are empty. Wait, what's that you say? You want to wipe the mud from your boots first? Do not bother, it's a waste of time. Come on, jump in and let's go. For it is the mud that offers us some small clues as to what could have occurred during this time period.
Flat Earth, dun, dun, dun. You called it, Julie. This guy's a flat earther. We'll watch a couple.
June 2011, Christ.
Let's watch a couple minutes of this guy talking about the mud stuff. I think the mud stuff's interesting, and then we'll wrap with this video, and then we'll wrap.
Yeah, the hard part with the documentary is I forgot that like literally that we do that first 30 minutes and we haven't even gotten to this point, which is an issue.
Yeah, well, then no, that's the thing. Well, this is where, like, for me, we're just gonna have to kind of intervene here. We'll watch a couple minutes of the mud stuff. This part is very interesting to me. It's curious, especially because it's universally existent on every single continent. That is peculiar, right? There's a lot of what?
What part is this one? What part is this one? Is this the?
You'll see. We'll watch a couple.
This is what we're arguing about in the WhatsApp chat with like the buildings building on top of other buildings.
Okay.
Thing.
Okay. Yeah, Jim just wants to go.
Church, New Zealand suffered an earthquake that left a lot of the city in chaos, destroying buildings and infrastructure and leaving over 50,000 homes without power. As a result, there were collapsed houses, ruptured water mains, flooding, and fires due to disrupted electrical lines. Due to the strong ground motions and intense shaking, part of the city experienced a strange phenomenon known as soil liquefaction. Sand boils emerged from asphalt roads, toppling and sinking cars, and causing boulders to fall from hills, resulting in more home damage.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
soil liquefaction occurs when saturated soil loses its strength and stiffness in response to an applied stress, such as shaking, or other sudden changes, such as a strong explosion. Soil loses.
I feel like all of the fear, you probably weren't old enough for this, Jonah, but when I was growing up, Jonah says liquefaction is not a word because he took advanced astronomical science in college.
Liquefaction is a word. That is a word. That was in the course.
He took academian science. What was it? What kind of science did you take in college?
Atmospheric science. I don't know how it's
astrological science. He just wants everybody to know, guys.
Astronomical science. Astronomical science.
Look, when I was growing up, everybody's seen this meme that quicksand was a bigger threat. When I was a kid, we used to actually play pretend how to escape quicksand because there were so many quicksand references in movies that I thought I was really going to have to know this skill. I wonder if quicksand wasn't the actual concern, but it's this, because this is actual quicksand. This was pavement a couple minutes ago, and now these people are crazy. This is actually concerning. All right.
its strength and stiffness in response to an applied stress, such as shaking, or other sudden changes, such as a strong explosion. Loose, saturated soil or sand has a tendency to compress when a load is applied. But in the event of a stress, such as shaking or an explosion, we see the opposite. The soil tends to dilute, and the result is treacherous quicksand or quick clay. The land turns to liquid, causing structures of heavy mass, such as buildings, infrastructure, and cars, to start sinking, topple over, or collapse. It can also affect dams and bridges. Turbidity currents can also form huge landslides that are impossible to stop. In the worst case scenario, entire cities may be destroyed. As you can see, liquefaction can move entire areas of land. The mud can rise dramatically and rapidly, and its destructive force is unstoppable. It is a well-documented phenomenon. The 1964 earthquake in Nagata, Japan, caused liquefaction, and we can see the effects very clearly in these photos. The same here with the 1964 Alaska earthquake. Buildings toppling, cars sinking, infrastructure collapsing. Once the stress has subsided, the soil begins to solidify once again, and we can see the aftermath. Uneven, muddy streets remain where there was once road paving. Returning to photographs of 19th century cities, we see a similar situation here. The roads are unrefined and full of mud. We see unsophisticated, uneven, coarse, and muddy roads everywhere against a backdrop of refined, sophisticated, and magnificent architecture. Could these cities have suffered the similar fate of soil liquefaction that we see in more recent times? Perhaps. But unfortunately, muddy roads is not enough evidence to base any conclusions on, is it? Children ask the most vital of questions, and adults, in their foggy stupor, usually provide the most unsatisfactory answers, often regurgitating learned nonsensical information that leave the child's imagination unfulfilled. Squelching along these muddy 19th century roads, observing their surroundings, a child may ask, why did they build the windows so low to the ground? And what an excellent question. Yes, why indeed did they build windows on ground level? For you see, the people we see in these photographs, sadly, did not build this architecture. And maybe some of them, at some point in their busy day-to-day life, ask the exact same question. We see it everywhere. Windows at ground level. Windows partially below ground level. First floor entrances raised from the ground level. Steps leading down to entrances below ground level. We can find this in almost every major city across our realm, in both old photographs and when we walk in the streets today. And what does it tell us? That a society with access to modest construction tools and horse and car constructed their infrastructure by first spending countless amounts of hours and energy clearing land with a depth of over 3 meters to begin their construction? Building basement floors is incredibly hard work. Since the 20th century, large powered excavation machines, such as backhoes and front-end loaders, have reduced the time and manpower needed to dig a basement dramatically, as compared to digging by hand with a spade. Perhaps you could say that our historical ancestors were just that dedicated to the architecture they built. And you could say that many of the sunken buildings we see are actually due to elevations and depressions in the natural landscape. The official narrative, which is always full of inconsistencies, perhaps would suffice if it was not for contemporary excavation. When we look at photographs such as this, it immediately dawns upon us that what we are seeing are windows and doors 2 to 3 meters below the ground surface. Why are there windows and doors underground? What is this that we see in our cities? Natural soil accumulation over time? Geologists have never been able to ascribe a consistent value to worldwide natural topsoil accumulation, because it is impossible. Some regions of our realm experience consistent topsoil accumulation, whereas other regions actually experience consistent erosion. Many historians and archaeologists have noted that many cities over the centuries have been destroyed through war and natural phenomena such as earthquakes, volcanic ash, and flooding. Aren't these just the layers of previous civilizations? No, they are not. We see over and over again whole floors of buildings consistent with the architecture existing above the layer of ground. You see, what lies beneath is not the unfamiliar traces of previous generations, but of the same generation that built these structures. And once you really see this kind of sunken, buried infrastructure that exists in such prevalence across our world, you can never unsee it.
Okay, pause it. It's pretty interesting how there are doors under it, right? Like, I am curious. Like, I mean, it is like interesting. It's like there is the plot. There is the theory of like just humans build on top of other buildings, right? But some of those structures look completely different. Like there was one back there where they look completely different structures, like almost completely different buildings, and then some of them.
I feel like we accomplished something in this podcast from this comment right here.
Yeah.
That's it. No, Jonah, you make a point. So when you had mentioned that beforehand about people building on top of other buildings, that's a thing that happens, right? But I think it's very obvious that many of these examples that he gives just aren't that, right? Like the amount of, like, no one is going to logically build half of a window that represents clearly what's half of the rest of the windows. Like all the buildings are, let's say, 6 feet tall, but this one just happens to be 3 feet tall and it looks like it's cut in half. That's just odd. And it's at the floor level. No one's going to do that. But then when you estimate, you realize that the rest
doors are even weirder, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
That? The doors.
The doors are even weirder. Like a window on the bottom level, that makes sense in the sense of like if there's a kind of like a basement level so that you get some light and air in.
A little bit of light, sure.
But a door is kind of weird. How the fuck would you get out the door if it was underground?
Yeah. This part gets really, and what's funny, go ahead, Gianmarco.
No, I mean, there was one that was literally a city on top of a city. It looked like Paris, to be honest. I don't know if we can go back. I would like to see that picture again.
Yeah, that was the one that I was like, those are two completely different architectural styles.
Like
that
this,
one,
This one is interesting, but there was another one. Can you go back a little
No,
bit?
I know which one you're talking about. It's the one where it's like literally like streets on top of it.
Yeah, so that
Yes.
this stuff makes me wonder, because did they build Paris on top of Paris? Because this looks like Paris to me. That's definitely a corner of Paris. That building on the right, that's for sure. If it's not, maybe no. I think it's Paris. I'm pretty
It looks
confident.
like Paris.
Yeah,
I agree.
So
Yeah,
I don't know. This makes no sense. But they,
Yeah.
you know what though? They speak a lot over there. They speak a lot about the underground parties. There are the underground parties in Paris. So I think
Yeah, is this is the same picture? This is the same place.
here you go. This is Paris for sure, or Brussels. Can be only those two cities. So if it's
Same.
Paris,
It's all the same shit, you know.
Paris, Brussels,
It's Paris, Brussels. It's the same shit in the end, you know. It's
Jersey.
Europe.
Basically Jersey.
Are
Yeah,
Belgians even? Who the fuck are Belgians?
well,
Are they
half the
German?
country was built
Are they
was built by the
French?
French,
Who
right?
the fuck are Belgians, guys?
All right.
Ethnically.
They're the
Okay.
ones. Bro, the wild-
If you go to Brussels, especially in the French side, the buildings look like in Paris, right? Also, maybe Bordeaux can look like that, but this it's crazy. This is crazy. I mean, the only logical outside of other ideas, the only logical idea is that this was a city on top of a city that at one point was constructed so bad that they rebuilt it higher. But
Maybe.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's just interesting because you're not going to build that like that on purpose, right? There's no
Yeah,
reason.
that's like
to
a
do that.
haphazard way to do it.
Yeah, it's just there's no reason for that. So this stuff like this, if we're being objective, these are very, very, very strong arguments to the fact that there was a pre-existing structure here, and then something happened to cover up the bottom half of it. Really, really interesting. Yeah, same with some of these. I was wanting to see. Okay, yeah,
there is another one that looks like Chicago. I don't know, or New York. That's crazy.
So look at this one. Watch me. I think we're about 2-3 more minutes of this, and then we'll be done. We'll wrap up, and we'll talk about. I want to talk about something that's interesting that correlates with this.
Okay.
You can never unsee it. We see that the foundations of old churches are actually the original first floors, with consistent entrances and windows.
Like, that's interesting because this looks like a complete structure as we would see it up top. But then the second you look at the rest of it, it actually makes so much more sense that it's as tall as it is. Interesting.
We see mosaics unearthed. We see pillars, columns, and arches that were originally much larger, and it was the layer of soil that reduced their size, as if they weren't big enough to begin with. And like with the 1964 earthquake in Nagata, Japan, we also find many so-called ancient structures that are leaning, as if at some point the soil beneath these structures loosened and liquefied. We have the Sahurzen Church Tower and Our Dear Lady at the Mountain Church Tower in Germany, the Tiger Hill Pagoda in China, the Leaning Tower of Neveyansk in Russia, the Leaning Temple of Huma in India, Oudkirk in the Netherlands, the Tower of Zaragoza in Spain, and, of course, the Tower of Pisa. The official liars of the world try to justify the buried and tilting structures we see, filling our heads with stories of antiquity and ever-changing geology. But it becomes trickier for them when we turn our attention to America. If we are to believe their narrative, then all of the buildings we see in 19th century photographs of the burgeoning American cities are newly constructed. Why do we see famous structures, such as the Washington Capitol building, with consistent infrastructure that buries very deep into the ground? And again, the inconsistencies do not add up. Why would an underdeveloped people waste resources, energy, and time constructing the foundations of the Capitol building to be consistent with the column style we find above the surface? The foundation did not have to feature columns.
So this was the part of the video or part of the movie where I was like, okay, everything else was plausible. This annoyed the hell out of me. I'm going to be honest. This is where I like very strongly started disagreeing, because if you look at this, and maybe I'm stupid for this, because what's happening here, if you look closely at these photos, you see how much construction equipment is here, right? This is like modern construction equipment in these photos. And when I looked up what these photos were, it was basically what was happening is that they wanted to construct another level below the Washington Monument or whatever. If I forgot this, the Capitol building, right? Okay. So in my head, this was kind of deceptive because it seems like he's at least implying, I don't know if he actually says it, but it seems like he's implying that this is like more like an excavation thing that they're finding was under the Washington Monument. I mean, really, this is a construction zone. If you look at the, if you look at the, like, look at pictures of the the Capitol building, or whatever the fuck the name of this building is, and like the construction of what they're talking about. I think it was literally a gift center or something. You can see closer photos of this stuff, and like I think that's cardboard that's next to it, next to like the columns and stuff.
Yeah, but
right.
Here's that may be true. Here's my concern though, right? Like over here, this looks new. This looks fresh. Mm-hmm. But this doesn't. This looks like a continuation of this column, and the coloration implies that this was under dirt. So this looks like it was excavated. Now, that's not to say that other parts weren't constructed. I'm sure that's true, but at least this particular part definitely looks like it was excavated. This doesn't look new. Like, why would they stain the columns to look like that?
The issue is I don't know how you build underground. That was also the part where I'm like, the issue is I have no idea, like, even if you can do that, like, that does seem a little bit weird, where it's like,
look, this is one continuous piece. This is definitely one continuous piece that was pre-existing underneath. At least that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
We have to fix and flippers, guys. We need fix and flippers on this.
I know, right?
Well, usually what builders do is they'll raise the house and then build under it, right? It's very rare that they do also excavate too, right? Part of me feels like I just don't know the process.
The new build side, like for me, if I'm looking at this objectively, and I could be wrong, right? If I'm looking at this objectively and I'm hearing what you're saying, this definitely is an active construction site, right? Was it just a
this is much more than an excavation site?
It's more yeah, I agree. This is more than an excavation site for sure. This looks new to me, right? This just looks newer.
Yeah.
This looks excavated, right? Now, to his credit, I don't know what he's referring to here, but he does mention these columns. So if this is excavated, which I don't know. What do you think? This looks excavated to me. You can see the dirt falling down right here, as if there was dirt in here. And the coloring just looks like it's been under dirt for a long time.
It's definitely been dirty. The question is can you build something new? It depends on how they fucking built that, is I guess my point.
But John, it could also be that this was there and they're just restructuring it. Like, and that was, they just built it. Wasn't it burned one time by the Brits? Was this the part that was burned, or was it the White House that they burned?
they burned down the White House, but they kind of burned down all of DC, to be honest.
Maybe this.
I don't know. I think this is one of those things that made me lose trust in this guy, where I'm like, wait a minute, this is for sure more than just like an excavation zone, right? This is like what I was talking about in the voice messages when we were talking on WhatsApp, where I'm like, okay, some of this stuff is like, okay, that's plausible, right? That is really interesting. And then there's some stuff where I'm like, wait, what are we talking about right now? I get your point about that being dirty, but then also like, if we could look up photos of like this whole thing, it's like, I'm almost positive those parts around it are like cardboard of like a very like the classic like new build shit they do on houses, right? And I'm like, okay, why aren't we mentioning that? It just seemed deceptive to me. Maybe that part is, maybe he's only talking about that part. It's like under the stairs, but it seemed, I don't know. It made my red flags go off in my head. It made my alarm.
There's a lot going on here, so I think that there's probably just because I mean, look, I guarantee you this goes all the way around, right? So there's a lot going on here. So I definitely see where you're coming from. If the only thing I can personally say from an opinion, like objective standpoint, when I look at this little part right here is the only part that's peculiar to me.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
This is the
only part. This was also the most damning part to me in the sense of like, okay, if like there were actually like a significant amount of buildings in America, then the whole like getting conquered and rebuilding, that doesn't work. That whole theory doesn't work in America's. This is his main example that looks like an excavation site, and it just threw me when it was like, I don't think this is all. I didn't think any of it really was an excavation. I get what you mean about under that stairs, but I don't know.
Yeah,
that was bothered me basically when I was watching it.
Right, Jonah. So the point stays that square under the stairs. It looks like it was the old entrance or something. It doesn't look like they just built it, right? You can agree to that, right?
It is hard to tell, and it's like very interesting in the sense of like, well, wait, like, okay, did they cover this up again, and then why build columns like that again, right?
Has anybody here been inside of the Capitol building? I have not. I've been in front of it. I've never been inside.
I have been in it.
Does this part right here go downstairs? Like, is there something down here that would justify?
There is a floor down there now.
There is a floor. Hypothetically, this could have been an entrance, and this could have been the second floor if we're trying to quantify this theory.
Yeah.
I haven't been
I don't know. And that's kind of because here's the thing, right? Like, okay, so Keanu, let's look real close. Try to zoom in on that little structure that's excavated.
I don't know if I can in this. Let me see.
Okay, it's okay. You don't need to zoom in. You see where like ground level is, like the base of that? How would you like they have like ladders in order to enter it. You see that? Yeah, like how would you actually get in there if that was like an original? Do you get what I'm saying? Like
yeah.
You have to get a ladder to get in there, which is like it doesn't seem like it would be like the entrance normally. You know what I mean?
That's a very good point. So there's no stairs.
There's no stairs.
Let's see if we see something that looks like. So this is close. I want to read this fucking thing because this looks like it was open and dirt's. I want to just go into these things and I want to dig out that dirt. That's what I want to do right now. I want to dig out that dirt from in here because there's dirt in there, right? So they didn't just put this here. There's dirt inside. So this was clearly there before, at least from what it looks like to me. But let's see when it goes to the next frame. Yeah, it doesn't look like. I don't know.
You would have to get a ladder to get up in there, and that doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean?
But also, it makes no sense to do it. Unless
it does not make sense to put columns underground. If this was originally a foundation and built like this, there's no freaking reason on the planet to put columns.
Plus, you're putting columns under stairs, which is super dangerous. Like it makes no sense. So I don't know. I don't know, guys.
Yeah,
interesting.
This is an
architect. This is fucking architect on it.
Yeah, we do. That's a good catch though, Jonah. Like I think that the rest of this stuff, I could see how that throws up a red flag. For me, this is the only part that really makes sense here. The rest of this stuff just looks like a construction site. But these little columns they are interesting to me.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Let's see what else he has in America, and then we'll go to the next thing.
Columns, we are told, are a stylistic choice, not a functional one. So why would they do this? In a nutshell, they wouldn't. We see images that suggest that the people of the 19th century were actually concerned with moving a lot of the vast amount of mud we see, leveling the ground and excavating existing structures.
That is a lot of mud. Okay, just to pause real quickly. I don't know that I caught this last time, but am I the only one that's actually curious about the amount of mud that needs to be moved in all of these random cities? This seems like a lot of mud. Maybe it was just muddy as hell back in the day.
That's just earth. There's just a lot of earth to move.
Maybe.
The previous city was Rome. I mean, it was rebuilt 8 times. So I think maybe they were just rebuilding.
Okay, rebuilding, you would think that like sand, dirt, some, but like that much mud, that high? Like the Rome one.
I feel like you could get it pretty quickly.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like-
like you're removing stuff.
Almost, it's half the size of the freaking Coliseum. That's
Yeah.
like 3 stories.
But what, like
No,
right now,
It's not 3 stories high. That's perspective is throwing it off.
Yeah, that's
Look at
true.
the human. Look at the
You're right,
human.
You're right. You're right. Yeah.
like
It's not fucking crazy. If it was as big as the Coliseum itself, that would be
Yeah.
wild.
like at the you see those doors. I think at the second door now there's a road that looks over that, and it's it's going down. It goes down. So
Interesting.
they kept on
Maybe it
building.
was a normal amount of mud for the 1800s. I don't know.
I
I don't
give
know.
you an example. They wanted to do a metro, an underground in Rome, and it was absolutely denied by everybody in UNESCO because they keep finding stuff under. There's so much stuff because it was rebuilt 8 times. So you can't touch anything underground. You can only build above, but they don't really do it anyways. So there's
Brings
stuff.
up a good question. Okay, well let's
Found and excavating existing structures. The consistency and prevalence of buried architecture across our realm indicate that whatever happened was a worldwide event, despite regional differences in natural topsoil accumulation and erosion. And there is no official narrative explanation that justifies the buried architecture we see. No explanation provided
Back to that.
to justify the amount.
what?
Go back to the last frame. No, not wait. No, there's one in
There is
between
no
these
official
two.
narrative
Just what the fuck is going on here? Like in this photo, what are these people doing? Do you see that? like, just real quick, what the fuck is this? Like, is this like a circus? I was looking at that for like a moment. I'm like, what is happening in this photo? Let alone like the conspiracy. What are the people doing?
There is mariachi, a woman taking a picture, and a soul.
Yeah, what the fuck is going on here?
Are those like revolutionary soldiers? Is that what he's
Dude,
doing?
danger Indians? Like, are they saying like what is happening? You know?
Definitely looks like the Cowardly Lion.
Anyways, I just was looking at that image like, what the fuck is this?
This is
no
the most
conspiracy. It's like,
this is the
what
most
are they
valid
doing?
portion of this evening. Jesus Christ.
I have nothing more for that. It's just very weird photo in general.
explanation that justifies the buried architecture we see. No explanation provided to justify the amount of mud we see in 19th century photographs of our cities.
That's a lot.
On the roads, mud piles from clearing, the roads uneven, the land ravaged, but the architecture grand, perfect, and intact. applauded by literary scholars for his use of fog as an opening simile and metaphor to paint a portrait of London as a corrupted hub amidst burgeoning industrialization. Many often overlook that Charles Dickens's 1852 novel Bleak House actually opens with a different image. London, Michaelmas term lately over, and the Lord Chancellor sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall. Implacable November weather, as much mud in the streets as if the waters had but newly retired from the face of the earth. Liquefaction caused havoc across Christchurch and the Garter. But these were isolated earthquake events, and only portions of each city were affected. It is not possible for there to have been huge, simultaneous earthquakes around the world during a similar period. Or is it? Even Wikipedia tells us that liquefaction can occur naturally or artificially, from an earthquake or other sudden change in stress condition. Even if this was the case, we do not see the same structural damage to the buildings in the 19th century like we do in cases such as Christchurch and the Garter. Most of the buried architecture we see is intact. It is either sunken or the ground level has been raised at least 3 meters, sometimes in a uniform manner, and other times partially buried in rolling mud hills, as if there were huge landslides. The strange case of the buried architecture provides the following conclusions: that what lies beneath are not the remains of previous civilizations. More often than not, the buried structures are consistent with the architecture we see above ground, that the structures are much larger than originally suspected, and therefore they are even more of a construction impossibility for a Victorian generation of horse and car, and those existing before them. That natural topsoil accumulation and soil liquefaction are not satisfactory explanations for what we see here. Whatever took place had to be something much larger and widespread, such as a natural or artificial earthly cataclysm of sorts. As many of the photographs show, many citizens of the 1800s were responsible for moving much of the mud, leveling the ground, and excavating buildings, which suggests that whatever happened had happened very recently in their past. The complete absence of a reasonable mainstream justification for the buried architecture we see suggests that the controllers of our realm are deliberately trying to hide whatever happened. And what of the deserted cities we see in the earlier photographs? If these cities were truly empty, then we must ask why. We must also ask how all the people got there in the end. In the space of 30 or so years, we see a city go from barren to bustling. Interestingly, it is Charles Dickens and 19th century literature more generally that offers some clues.
All right, I think that pretty much covers it for this chapter of what this guy says. I wanted to show something that I thought was really, I'm going to mute this guy.
So yeah, the issue with this documentary is it's 5 hours long. This guy could have made that way fucking shorter.
This was a series of 5 or 6 videos. And then they got removed from YouTube. They got removed. So somebody compiled them and put them into one big thing, which is this. And I downloaded it because I had a feeling it was going to get removed. And then literally 3 days later, it got removed. So it's the only reason I have it. You can't, I don't know if somebody re-uploaded it, but you can't find this online. This is what's interesting to me. Look at this. This is post-excavation. So look up here. This was the previous entrance. So everything around here, everybody would have thought this was just what was going on. And then when they excavated, they realized there's a whole other thing happening down here. A whole other situation happening down here. These windows were under the ground. So this definitely was a completely different, and we don't know if this is the bottom floor. This could go deeper than this. So if his point is that something happened, then we have to ask, one, what the hell has to happen that this much mud covers essentially, at least just in this picture, a minimum of one whole story across an entire city? But more importantly, why would they build? What would cause this to happen in every country? Because every single country had this happen. That is very, very interesting, in my opinion. What are your thoughts, Jonah? DeMarco?
I don't know. Just brings up an interesting point, though. That's also the interesting thing to ask is why like if these were all original structures, why would they have an entrance on the bottom and then have like an entrance really high up?
My argument would be this was built afterwards. The building was found, there wasn't an entrance, so they built secondary entrances and then later found that the original entrance is actually down here. Because this looks like as much of an entrance as this.
Interesting. I don't know. I mean, it's all interesting. It's hard to tell, in my opinion, whether it's like an alternate history. Because the issue is that I don't know what I don't know. That's the biggest hard part about all of this is like, there could be an easy explanation for like how soil works that none of us know, right? That's the hard part is I truly just have no clue about so much of this shit that I'm just like, I can see with my eyes certain things. I can reason certain things making sense and certain things not making sense. But that's the hard part with is there's so many different issues at the same time, right? Where it's like I don't know if it was like a completely because also guys I've watched more of this whole thing. His whole the thesis of this is that basically it wasn't ancient civilizations. It was actually, never mind. I didn't get to that. Did you get to the end? Who does he say it is in the end?
I don't remember.
I don't remember either, but he doesn't say it's humans, right? So
I honestly don't know. I don't know because I don't think he goes into.
I only watched the first 2 hours.
Yeah,
I don't kept it in a while. He just like I still think I was in the part where it's like, isn't this kind of weird type of shit?
So he goes into different sections, which if you guys are intrigued, we can go into different parts of it. The electricity part is very interesting.
This is the thing is like just like I have no idea if this is true. Like that logically makes sense to me. And then it makes it very easy for me to be like, okay, easy, done. No bedrock. That's what happened, right? But then at the same time, that could also just not be true at the same time.
So historically, like the Torre di Pisa sank, right? So I don't know how many other buildings sank. I'm not familiar with this building sank. I think I've seen this. I was trying to find it, but I'm in the wrong town, so I can't tell you what's the name of this. But I think this is, I don't have an answer for this. Like either the only answer I give to this is there was a war and they built above it and they made it prettier. And maybe it was just one floor at the beginning. Or maybe
which I think sometimes did happen. Like there were some times where they just destroyed the original building and then the people decided to rebuild on top of it.
Yeah, for sure.
That had to have happened.
I think a couple of the pictures that he showed here, I could see that being the case because it looks different up top. Like it's different. It's not even the same type of brick that was used on that floor. Yeah. So that makes sense to me. But like this is the same fucking building. Like there's just zero equivocation here that this was one build that somehow ended up underground. And they didn't build it this way, I don't think, because why would you put windows 6 feet, 4 feet underground? You're just not going to.
Now, are there examples of thinking, building sinking? I believe this is Italy. Building sinking. I would love to do a research on this because this is super interesting, right? I have no answer.
You don't know if this is Italy or not? That's why we have you on the show, Gianmarco.
By looking on the left, by looking on the left, I would say this is definitely Italy. But
yeah, you gotta give us a yes or no on that, bro. Come on.
99% sure this is Italy. Look at the houses in the back.
Imagine going to a restaurant and saying, I'm 99% sure this is pizza.
So fucked up, yeah, Keanu. That was so mean. I'm sorry, Gianmarco. We just needed a joke in there. I didn't mean it to be at your expense. Holy shit.
So I think this is definitely something that it's unexplicable. Unexplicable, guys. Unexplicable. And plus, why are there bricks? You see that they build bricks inside the windows. It's like if it's closed with bricks. It's
Yep.
really weird.
Yeah, so it's a
Which
weird
almost
building.
makes you wonder that if, okay, let's say hypothetically, this thing goes under, they're in the building, it's under because there's no protection here where the windows are, it starts breaking, the dirt starts sinking inside. What are you going to do?
A weird building in general too. Like, look at the top floor. You see the windows. Some of them are like completely blocked. It might just be like a
They look
debilitated.
broken. Yeah, they look like they boarded them up.
Yeah.
Here's what's interesting, guys. I genuinely do not remember what this guy's conclusion is. I just remember I don't agree with it. I think he said that like the whole Earth was repopulated like 200 years ago or something like that. I think that was his conclusion or something weird. I don't agree with many of these guys' premises, but he just does. I think he raises really interesting questions. This, for me, guys, and this goes back to the podcast that we did a while back on how do you make decisions. I look at stuff like this and I just look at this and I say, the world is curious. The world is vast. Time is vast. And it's far more vast than simple explanations allow for. I just think that it's a limiting worldview to just accept everything that you're told and ask no questions. So as a default, I approach things from a curious mind. Okay, you're going to present me something that's crazy? Okay, that doesn't match what I was told. But the reality is, what the hell do I know about a 300-year-old building? And why am I going to trust just what some random stranger told me? Because it seems to make sense. I'm going to think for myself. And the cool thing about this video, while there may be a lot I don't agree with about this guy, what he says, is that he does raise questions, but only if you're the type of person who is open to asking questions. And I just think that there's far too few people who are open not asking questions. I think we just need to ask more questions. And I think when you ask questions, you start to realize there's more things out there that are worth questioning than we actually previously thought. Let me show you this. This is what I thought. So I don't remember his conclusion as to what this why this happened the way it did. But here is a philosophy or a thought that a lot of people used to share. Right? And it is the flood, right? In 2025, you say a global flood story like from the Bible, you get laughed at. They say it's a fairy tale. How could that happen? You Google it now, there are actually a number of geologists who actually believe and say that there was a that skyline, right? That's sad. That's sad to see. Is that a skyline or a prelude? That's a skyline. But there's a lot of geologists that actually believe that geologically there is a huge amount of evidence for a global flood at some point in our history. This is a burgeoning belief system by geologists that historically there was probably a global flood. Okay, that's interesting because hypothetically, just as a quick question, Jonah, would you agree or disagree? We have this curiosity trying to justify sunken buildings anywhere, let alone everywhere, all sunken in a similar fashion. That by itself is odd. But question for you, hypothetically, if geologists or scientists were able to prove one day that there was a global flood, would that be pretty clear evidence to justify there was a global flood and the whole earth was underwater a pretty significant amount? And that would cause right?
Wait, if I understood you, like are you saying if geologists think it is, then I think it was
discovered. No. Let's say I'm just throwing out a hypothetical, right? Hypothetically, sure. Geologists came out tomorrow and we say science just discovered and proved there was a global flood. We know for a fact there's so much evidence it happened. Would that justify this many buildings being looking like they were underwater and the mud settling that much higher than the original first floor used to be?
Well, the weird part about that is like these buildings aren't that old. Like even the Bible would say the global flood happened 4,000, 5,000 years ago, right?
So, but pausing that, because that's a different question. We can address that in a second. But outside of that, forget barring how long ago the flood may have been, hypothetically, if the flood happened in the timeline that is appropriate for what we know about these buildings, it makes sense, right?
It's possible. It's possible for sure. I feel like these buildings aren't old enough, though, is the issue. Like that, like I don't, that's the hard part.
So this is, and I don't remember what he says. I think this is the point that he makes. Maybe it's not, but
I think it was that these buildings are like thousands of years old, right?
There are a lot of people who look at stuff like this after looking into this that believe that. They believe that these buildings were not built in the 1800s. They were built by a civilization much, much older, somewhere between 6,000 and 12,000 years ago. And the technology that existed 6,000 to 12,000 years ago would have justified the ability to make structures as ornate as these structures happen to be. They had the technology, they had the resources, they had the wherewithal to be able to build something like that. What happens is a global flood takes place, and then this is the question that everybody wants, John.
Unfortunately, Jess, I think this is like an hour in. Like this stuff is kind of crazy. It gets real fucking crazy after a while.
You went to college and got your degree in geochemical ionospherism, right?
Shut up, dude. What? I took a single class, bro. They just didn't mention the ionosphere. That's all I'm saying.
Now it's just a class.
You know what's crazy? Because I saw Jess mention this earlier. It definitely is a word, and they just didn't teach it to me. So I look like a fucking idiot if I mention it.
There's more to it that is interesting that maybe later or a different episode we should go through. Because I remember when you start speaking about the buildings, even for someone like me, there were questions that I started asking myself, right? So I feel like the best part of this is still to come, where you actually ponder on what he's saying.
Yeah, the hard part is that, like, I mean, how long we can keep going for a little bit.
No. I think we got to a good stopping point with this thing. There are other aspects to discuss with this. I think the interesting point for me for this is the just for the summary for everybody else who has no clue is like, okay, cool. So what then? The what then is that there are a lot of people who believe that there were ancient civilizations that were just far more advanced. And those civilizations had the capacity to build structures like this. They had the capacity to build things like pyramids. And then what happened is the civilizations died, perhaps in that global flood that took place. And what they left behind was all of this technology. So what many people believe is that these cities were not built. They were discovered. They were claimed. In my head, if I'm looking at this and I'm being objective, okay, let's objectively look at this argument. Whether we think it's a silly argument or not, let's weigh it based on its merit. Because we know for a fact that there is if we want to be fair, there is no logical merit to building a bunch of buildings underground and putting windows. I'm sorry, if you're going to sit here and tell me that is more logical, then you're just not being intellectually fair,
mole people,
in my opinion. What, the mole people? They don't need windows.
Yeah, what about the mole people? You ever heard of mole people?
Mole people they don't need windows. They don't want windows. They're mole people. But here's the thing, right? So at this point, we have to acknowledge we're questioning things at this point. Okay, so if I'm questioning it and you're telling me that there's an idea, there's a theory that these buildings are thousands of years old, not hundreds of years old, okay, well, that actually explains why you got people taking pictures of empty, gigantic cities. That explains that. How else are you going to get everybody to go away? Well, if the cities are empty because there was nobody there yet, that makes sense to me. We know that historically we have a bunch of explorers. Everybody wanted to be an explorer. Why did everybody want to be an explorer? We assume that they wanted to be an explorer because they wanted to discover new lands. It could stand a reason that maybe there was a common understanding back in the day that discovering new lands is cool. But what if there was a common understanding that there was a global flood and those global floods left behind completely vacated cities? That for me is a almost bigger reason for an explorer to go out and risk their lives to explore the world to discover something like this. You get into the 1800s, hey, I got my photographer with me. We're going to go back and we're going to bring people. We're going to bring the money. We're going to bring the king's finances. And what's the king going to do? King's going to claim the biggest building in the place as his own. And they're going to reestablish it, right? This would make sense why there's so many Victorian structures and structures that don't make sense for the era in a time where they weren't really communicating like that because they were transporting by ship, but the buildings look all the same. But if there was a common knowledge, then there would be common conversation. And for me, that was curious. And I don't know if this was the point that he was trying to make, but look at the language that, who was this? Dickens? Charles Dickens. You look at the language he uses. He says, sitting in the inn hall, implacable November weather, as much mud in the streets as if the waters had newly retired from the face of the earth. I'm sorry, guys. True or false? When I read this, this tells me that he believes that waters covering the entire face of the earth was common knowledge at the time that he wrote this. Otherwise, there's no reason to say something like this.
Could be a metaphor, though. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be literal.
He's talking about mud.
No, as much mud in the streets as if the waters had but newly retired from the face of the earth. Like, but it's not a metaphor. That's the wrong. I'm using the wrong thing. It's not a metaphor, but it's basically it's not a metaphor. I forgot the name of this. I didn't take enough English classes in college, but it might be a simile. But basically, it's like it could be poetic language, right? Like, this is hard to tell whether he literally means. I mean, the as if makes me think he does it. Like, why, if it was common knowledge, why not just say as much mud in the streets because the waters had but newly retired from the face of the earth, you know? Or hyperbole. Thank you, Jess. Like, I feel like it's more poetic language he's using on it, in my opinion, personally.
I don't know. There's a lot to factor here. For me,
it's also Charles Dickens. Remember, his works are like they're somewhat fantasy. Like Moby Dick is about a whale. It's like about a
that's a factor. It's also Victorian English, right? So
that's their whole thing with novels, right?
Yeah, so. Like so there's a lot of things that like we have to infer a lot. So this is not by any means a smoking gun. For me, I just think it's curious because when I read this, I personally hear this just as if anybody says this. Like, it's just you're saying something like everybody knows. Like, right, when somebody says no Diddy. We all know what that means. You know what I mean? We all know what that means. But
what a hell of an example, but okay.
Yeah, it's the first one that came to mind. But it's just a euphemism or a phrase that just we say because everybody kind of gets it. And I feel like that's what I infer personally, and I could be wrong for sure. But I infer when he says this, it's like, okay, you're implying that, like, okay, everybody knows that this happened, and you're saying it's so muddy outside that it looked like it happened again. That's what I read when I say this. It's so muddy outside, it looked like the flood just ended again, a second time. That's what I see when I read this.
Maybe. I feel like there needs more context for that, though.
Maybe to say that he's saying that, it could just be that it's raining a lot and it's just being,
Yeah, we don't know. But that's the implication, right? And so there are a lot of people who believe that cities like Atlantis existed, right? Well, Atlantis was known, at least in mythology, to be one of the most fantastic. And some people still wonder if Atlantis was a real place. The people who share this theory, many of them believe that places like Atlantis were real, right? And during the flood, things settled higher, and many of the water cities were lost. There are lots of underwater cities. You can go right now to Japan and see lots of underwater cities that imply that these cities were out flooded, right? So it's interesting. Do we know that that's true? Obviously, we don't really know, but that would be where their conclusion is how they say that these things came to pass. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know. What do you think, Jamarco? Are you as offended as you thought you were going to be? Because you was ready to fight before.
Oh yeah, I am. But here's the thing. I feel like there are the parts later where he speaks about how the structures could have a different meaning, which
the electricity part, that part's crazy.
I'd love to do a deep dive on that one because that opens so many parentheses that makes you wonder, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first part,
Jonah was less impressed by that. That for me, I would say, is as interesting as the mud part, in my opinion.
Wait,
maybe more the electrical implications.
I gap there because it's not 2 hours.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't. I wasn't. That one didn't get me at all. That one, I'm like, this just sounds like horseshit to me. That's what I thought, to be honest.
Bells, there's all that part, that it's interesting.
Bells are also very, very interesting as well. And then you get to things like the World Fair, right? The World Fair is another really, really curious. And I was doing research on this, and the World's Fair is another thing that just really, really raises questions. Are you familiar with the World's Fair, Jonah? I know we talked about it a little bit.
When we talked about it, we talked about it a lot.
It's like
we talked about it 2 or 3 times at this point about it.
It's one of those things that there are so many conspiracy around it for whatever reason, because it made no sense. There's certain things about it didn't make much sense. So I don't know. Like I've seen it in movies and shows. I don't know. That's something that
I'll show you guys. I'll show you this. Here, I'll show you two little. I sent this in the group chat. So.
Oh yeah, and to mention DQ, I believe for all these images that he shows, what I would do, I would love to go and see which building is that and what happened with it.
What do you mean?
That's what I would do. This is the only thing. After I've done that, I can be on your side or his side. Let's put it this way. But I would have to go building by building from those pictures. See, I hope he has it on the website and check the building history, when it was built according to Google and so on, and see what happened in that area, right? Because he shows the Tower of Pisa. I mean, we know the story of Tower of Pisa. It was built wrong, and the guy. Now, is there a different story? Maybe, but that's what we know about it. So, Paris is an interesting thing. The thing about Washington D.C. is super interesting. San Francisco makes no sense. So,
what do you think about the San Francisco thing, Jonah? I know we discussed it. That part is actually interesting to me too, right? That's a big city to build with that many people in that period of time.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? So, let me share my screen. So, and I'm just honestly thinking this out as we're talking, right? So just bear with me. This isn't a fully developed thought. The city of San Francisco, the population today, I think it's 800,000. I'm trying to hold on. Of the actual city, right? Yeah, 800,000. So, let's look at a picture of the actual city, panoramic of San Francisco. Let's just compare real quick to those ones, because in my head, it's okay. We have crazy more big buildings now, and San Francisco, I feel spreads out more. So and this is hard. I mean, this isn't exactly the same.
It's 7 by 7, no? I remember my father always told me San Francisco.
It's not very big. It's super small, right?
House by
so
7.
Jonah ordered the cable so he can fix his shit. He says it'll be better by next week, guys. So we'll see.
Am I still fucking lagging out right now? Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
Sorry. But my point that I'm concerned about is it might look like it's a lot of buildings. Maybe that's actually what 200,000 looks like. You know what I mean? The issue is I don't know what millions of people can fit into versus just hundreds of thousands.
Yeah,
because when I look at a picture of San Francisco now, it's way bigger fucking buildings, way with skyscrapers of buildings now, right? So I just don't know, even if the area is the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then it just Jess shared the time frame back then. It was 2 to 6 years to build one building. That picture had thousands of buildings. So if the time frame is 30 to 100 years at most, There is no freaking way that they were able to build that many buildings in that period of time during that time frame. They wouldn't be able to build that many buildings.
How many builders did they have? Because we don't actually know.
Well,
right?
they definitely had less than 200,000.
Yeah, that's true. That's accurate.
Right. And if you remove children and women, and 100% of the population did nothing but construction and nobody ate or did anything else, then maybe you had 50,000 people. You probably had 10,000 construction workers. 10,000 construction workers are not building thousands of buildings in 30 years.
I don't know. It's hard to tell. I just can't tell because what's hard for me about this whole thing is I don't actually know what's human. This camera. I don't actually know what's humanly possible and what's not humanly possible. You know what I mean? Like in the end, you and all of us are just guessing as to whether humans can do this quickly or not. That's the hard part that makes me like, I don't know.
Well, you know? I'm good with that, right? Like I'm good. I would rather you or anybody just be like, honestly, I don't freaking know. Like for me, that's more powerful than saying, yeah, no, that's not possible. It definitely was done that way. Like we just don't know, right? Yeah, but they didn't have Amish people in San Francisco. Now, had they had Amish, then we're having a different conversation because they had a shit ton of butter. But I don't do Amish work with masonry stuff? I don't think Amish are masons. It's a lot of bricks. I don't know if that counts. Your whole theory might be shit, Jess, because bricks. Do Amish brick? Can an Amish brick?
And with that, Profit and Paradox episode. No, just end it with onto Amish bricks or whatever.
Check this out. Check this out real quick. We'll wrap up with stuff. Yeah, Amish do wood, right? So then that wouldn't count, but that would have actually been believable. Check this thing out. This is really interesting. Now, obviously, it's a TikTok video, so they take their artistic.
You're not sharing your screen anymore. Just realize that.
I know. But this part's interesting. Check this out.
Did you know America used to be covered with beautiful ancient cities that resembled ancient Rome and Greece and Atlantis, but were destroyed in a massive cover-up? This is the Chicago World's Fair of 1893. The purpose of the
Chicago World's Fair. These were the buildings. These were the lights that we were talking about the other day. Right? You remember that, Jonah?
I do.
Pay attention. Like this is pretty ornate, right? So, I mean, again, how long does it take to build a building like this?
Are you asking me, or was that rhetorical?
You know, I'm asking you.
Like from the looks of it, it probably would take years at least. Like I agree that it looks like it should take years.
Listen.
Fair was to introduce electricity to the general public for the first time. All of this was said to be built in just 3 years, solely for the event. Look at how detailed everything is. There is no way this was built in just 3 years. This was only a few years after the invention of the light bulb. There are theories that this city wasn't built for this fair, and that it was remnants of the ancient Tartarian Empire. Historians say the
let's go into this one here. Present.
But you're not gonna tell them what you're gonna show the Tartarian Empire, dude.
We can, but I guess I'm not here.
It's funny how you show like. Why are we showing half the clip?
Because I want to show this part too. Listen.
Okay.
Chicago Fair was a great success, being one of the largest outdoor events of the time and was showing people a future America. It then closed less than a year later in October 1893. Over the coming years, the park was completely...
Just to be clear, that was the thing, right? That you just saw that. This part right here, this is the World's Fair. These are all the lights, right? This is all of the... Look at how big the splendor of these buildings are, right? The official narrative, I looked this up, looked up the whole official story. They built all of this in 3 years, specifically for the World's Fair, and then burned it all down. That's the story.
Park was completely demolished, with parts of the park to be destroyed by fire under the park commissioners. The Chicago Fair was a great...
But why burn it?
No idea. I feel like it's kind of stupid to burn it. If it was that pretty, why not just keep it?
Makes no sense.
Now, every World Fair, to be clear, has a very, very similar story. The World's Fairs demonstrated the world's best technology.
They don't do them anymore, right?
I don't know. I think they did some afterwards, but I think these were like.
Realize you and I, if they still do them, you and I have to go to one and investigate.
They build stuff in stone and then they burned it.
So they say that some of the buildings they built in stone, some of them they built with wood and then made it look like fake stone.
Okay.
For the sake of the event, and then burnt it down. So they built a building this big, fake, so they could burn it down after one event.
Did they gain anything at that event? Like, did they gain electricity for America? No, that was the.
No.
Well, I mean, it was just like to show off. Was the whole point of it.
Flex. It was so the Paris World Fair happened first. The Paris World Fair, supposedly they built the Eiffel Tower to show off at the Paris World Fair. And what they did here was they built a Ferris wheel, and that was their flex. And the Ferris wheel was 50 cents a ride, and that's how they made money, so on and so forth. But very interesting.
The tower, the Torre Eiffel, they built it in how many years?
The Eiffel Tower?
Yeah, Eiffel Tower. He said it in Italian.
What did you just say?
He said it in Italian. He said,
in how many years did they build that? Because I think it took them a long time.
No, I'm trying to get you to say the Eiffel Tower in Italian again, just because I like hearing you say that.
Torre Eiffel.
So romantic. I'm pulling it up right now.
2 years, 2 months, and 5 days.
They built the Eiffel Tower in 2 years. Kiss my ass, bro.
That's what it says. What they say. The Eiffel Tower was built for the 1889 World Fair, which celebrated the 100th anniversary of the French Revolution.
So now I have a question. How long did it take to build the Statue of Liberty? Now I want to know that.
Statue of Liberty. 9 years.
10 years, because that's complicated. Okay.
Interesting. I don't know. So I bring this up. I believe, because I'm not extremely versed in it, right? I'm not. I'm just like, right? But what I believe is the implication here is that many people believe that for whatever reason, the people who found all these buildings, the buildings that were here, had some extremely advanced technology that they weren't going to be able to explain because America was such a new country. There was no way to explain. You could justify Europe building those over X amount of time. Harder in America. You just discovered America. Now you're building buildings like this. How are you doing that? Right? Like people are having bread shortages, but you're able to do stuff like this. You're able to do stuff like this, to be clear, because this is an actual picture. They're able to build stuff like this. Is it this one? Right? Okay, cool. So basically what the implication is that this was just another building that existed beforehand. These just were all here, just like the other building. But for whatever reason, they destroyed these ones. And there's lots of buildings in the United States that kind of fell under the same thing. There's lots of buildings. Yeah, it was just a common thing, right? A lot of these old structures were just destroyed by fire. There's the Chicago fire, the San Francisco fire, this fire, which is different than the Chicago fire, just to be clear. This is not the same Chicago fire as the Great Chicago Fire that happened in the 1890s. So yeah, really interesting perspectives. I don't know what that means, but the official narrative is that they built that whole thing in 2 years just to burn it down.
So question, what are the odds that all those fires were China?
China. That's Jim Marco's territory right there.
Space laser. And you guys know from which country?
Was it space laser?
Was it the space lasers?
Was it the 1800s? Like, you don't know.
Jewish space lasers or Chinese space lasers?
The Jewish ones.
They were Jewish.
I'm just throwing it out there. We have a few prayers over space lasers.
You do? Like you personally?
Me personally.
That's awesome.
That's good. Congratulations, bro.
That's awesome.
I don't know. Interesting stuff, guys. What do you think? What do you think? If we had to take a vote, let's take a vote here, guys, as we wrap this thing up. I'm really curious as to what everybody says. How do we vote this? if there was a meter, right? And the meter was option 1, nah, fam. Everything the history books told me is true, and I believe them. Number 2, nah, fam. There's way too many questions. History books clearly lied, and now I'm going to search for truth, and I'm going to bring it all back to the Prophet and Paradox podcast so you guys can talk about it next week. Or number 3, I genuinely don't know, but this was interesting enough to make me think about it. 1, 2, or 3. Where does everybody land?
I feel like everyone's going to be 3.
Not everybody. Some people won't.
All right. Just because it's funny, I'm number 1.
You're going to this. Wait, which one was number 1? Which one? Number 1 was
no. Was like everything's real. This is all bullshit. Like
100%.
Because it's really funny. Just to piss you off. I mean, I feel like number 3, like like a lot of these I don't know. I'd have to spend time researching it and being like, what is it? Like, is this real? Is this not real? What's the reason for this?
Like Julie was cool, right? Because Julie started out basically saying you can't actually believe this, right? And then towards the end, she's like, okay, this is something to ponder. For me, that's just the point, right? Like for me, that's the point. That's the point, is just to see, is there something to think about here? But I don't know. Honestly, Jonas, so you genuinely are something to ponder for you? Don't say it to make me feel better, bro. I don't need you to support my emotions. I'll be okay.
This is really actually, if you want to actually how I feel, it's like I'm pretty in line with Jess, where it's like I feel like the issue is that I feel like if I actually did research onto how these things happen, it would just lead me to the historical narrative. Most likely. I don't actually have any evidence for that because I haven't done the research. That's just what my gut is telling me right now. That's what I feel like would happen. I could be completely wrong. I just feel like if I do the research, I think it's very unlikely I get Tartar society.
Tartars.
You know?
No, bro,
you're
Polish. You don't have it. No worries.
Who did you vote for? Who did you vote for, Jonah? Who did your gut tell you to vote for? I'm just
Kamala.
kidding. Don't answer that. Jonah, or not Jonah. Jamarco, what about you, bro? Like, where do you land on this? Because you were pretty.
You say that 4 is no.
There's only 3. There was no. Number 1 is I'm Jonah and I'm a vegan. Number 2, no disrespect to vegans out there. Just we're making fun of Jonah, not vegans. Just to be clear.
Full disrespect to Jonah.
I love vegans. I don't like Jonah. So 1 is nah. The history books told the truth. This is stupid. 2 is nah. The history books are full of shit. I believe this, and now I'm never gonna think anything's true again. Number 3 is nah. I honestly don't know, but this was interesting enough to make me question things.
So 3 is okay. Aspects of this I question for sure. Aspects of this I question. I think we didn't even get to the point where he talks about kids missing.
The missing kids is crazy. The missing kids is a whole different topic. The missing kids is a whole different show.
Right. So when he talks about there were enough people in Moscow at that time, I really, it's going to be very difficult for me to tell him that it's right. I really think it's, as Jess would say, apple to oranges. I'm like, where are you? But there are aspects of this that are interesting. Like I cannot explain all those buildings that has excavations to that level that you're like, okay, how you had multiple how was it built like that? And what happened here? And I don't disregard the fact that it could have been a flood of some sort in some areas, right? I don't disregard that. I think that is definitely something that could mean something. There's something there.
Jess, what's number 4? While he's talking, type out number 4. I want to know what
number 4 it's our comment before.
Oh.
This comment is our number 4.
Oh.
And then beside that, San Francisco, I believe like the rest we would really have to see. I would love to have somebody that understands how constructions were made 200 years ago.
Helpful, for sure. That'd be cool.
And just start going through this, and say, okay, well, this makes sense for San Francisco. Like you made a very solid point when you say maybe 10,000 constructors were there, right? I keep saying how do we define people there? Like, how did you know how many people were in San Francisco 200 years ago? Like,
yeah, what kind of census process did you have? Yeah,
they had documents. I know I'm making fun of it, but like they had Chinese people. We don't know how many were there. There were
how many illegal immigrants were in San Francisco?
Yeah,
all of them. No, there were a lot. There were a lot. I mean, like the Chinese people were there as slaves. So there's just so many different things that were. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot.
Mexicans, right? I think the 200,000 is considering British and Irish, and maybe some Poles and some French and some Italians, right? But I think everybody else was considered basically not a person or not even counted. So,
yeah, how many slaves were there?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I think this was like right when slavery was like getting done, but I don't know.
So there is that to be considered, but I don't know. And also, it's a fair question to ask because it looks very developed for those times, right? I strongly disagree with the guy when it comes to mixing up Greek. Like the guy, just read about it. Read about architecture, the Greek architecture.
Read about it. Fucking read a book.
Like, you know, read about it. People write about this stuff, right? And I'm sure it's gonna make a point. I think he makes a point that maybe somebody in the backhand was organizing this and rewriting history. I'm just gonna say this one more time because I have to. Europe, back then, you couldn't. There was no way you could organize Europe because there were too many kings shitting at each other. There was no way.
Shitting at each other.
Literally, just throwing at each other. So and that's how they wrote history. Like, oh, Jonah, you should know about Jonah and what he does, you know? And Jonah talks shit about DQ. And now you can read what Jonah was saying about DQ. And why would he say that? And it was a circle of gossip. People wrote about it. So I don't think you can speak about Europe in those sense. I think later on, it happens in some aspects. But it doesn't happen back then because there's too much going on, and the countries don't know each other. They don't trust each other. They don't speak the same language. It's, you know, I think that on that aspect is a little too wrong. And we can, next time, if you guys want to continue this, I can show the map of the history of China in 2,000 years, the history of Australia, of America, and then put the history of Europe. And it's war after war after war after war. This conquering, destroying, conquering for 2,000 years. They hated each other.
But I don't think you're understanding that, like, all of that's fake news.
Fake.
What?
Like, I just everything you just said is
Italians didn't even exist until 50 years ago, bro.
You read all those books, bro. Every single one you're thinking of, you read it in fucking Italian.
Italians,
bro.
Italians started in Brooklyn. That's where Italians started, my guy.
They started in Brooklyn. Exactly. That's where Italy starts. 1861 in Brooklyn. That's what it is.
All right.
Good stuff. Yeah, honestly, this was a fun conversation. What do you think, Jonah? Do we stay on a similar rabbit hole?
I'm down to keep going down with it. Like I had a decently fun time today, so I'd be down.
Let us know in the comments, guys. Do you want us to keep going down weird questioning history rabbit holes? There's more to question. This documentary questions a lot more. There's more outside of this documentary. Or should we just go back to getting Jonah laid? Or should we do something else? Let us know. This is the question. These are the questions that people have. Let us know. Shoot us a text. Shoot us a message. Tell your friends, aunties, uncles. Share your posts. Like, comment, subscribe. Jonah, you got any final wishes, bro, before we chuck deuces?
No, I think it was a good podcast. I think it's in. Here's the one thing I will end it with, which, Kiana, that I do really respect you for, is that, and it's something like that's happened over this podcast of like, it is good to stop and be like, okay, wait a minute. Reminder, do I actually have any fucking clue if the museum people are right or not? They could be completely wrong. In the end, I didn't read the fucking books about Julius Caesar. I'm watching YouTube videos about Julius Caesar, right? I'm like getting like a third source of a third source of a third source. So I will end it and like give you credit, Keanu, in the sense of like, it is good to always question. I think this guy ain't it, but who knows? You know, like it's always good to keep an open mind is what I'll end it with.
I love it. Well, that being said, Prophet and Paradox, episode 38. We'll be back at it again. Appreciate y'all. Do something special this week. See y'all next time. Peace.